Hey everyone. So I initially covered this case back in the fall, but I am not going to replay that case before I add in all the additional stuff that has happened since then, which is so much and it gets wild. I'm just going to give you a really quick recap of that. So if you already know the backstory, feel free to go ahead and skip ahead. You should be able to just see the chapters below or they are in the descriptions. So in Clark County, Indiana, the trouble in the sheriff's department started around 2014 when then Sheriff Danny Rodden was caught up in a federal sting that was not so pretty. He was charged with interacting with a prostitute and then lying to federal investigators about it. He was ultimately placed on administrative leave, and well-known defense attorney Larry Wild represented him. We'll see Larry Wild in just a minute. Former Sheriff Rodden ultimately confessed and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 240 hours of community service. Let's jump back a few years in time to the early 1990s. Jamey Noel attended the Indiana University Southeast and received an associate's degree before going on to work on the fire crew at the former Indiana Armory ammunitions plant. He also worked part-time in the county's probation office, and that was before he became a state trooper for Indiana and spent 22 years there. While he was still working as elected as the head of the Clark County Republican Party. That was in 2009. 2011, he selected to serve on the 9th Congressional District Chair. By 2014, he began his campaign for sheriff. Mike Pence, then the governor of Indiana, campaigned for him, and Noel had many strong political ties. At some point in time, Noel became the head of the New Chapel EMS and the Utica Fire Association as well. Noel made a pledge to root out corruption in the jail systems as he took over Clark County. Somehow, this plan to root out corruption culminated in the television show 60 Days In, which filmed seasons 1 and 2 in Clark County, Indiana. It later moved on to Fulton County, Georgia. The premise of the show was regular people off the street were taken and put in jail for 60 days. They had to keep their identities a secret and basically go undercover to root out the corruption.
I know that they started arguing over tater tots early in the morning, so that's what led on conflict and stuff.
If you don't wait till the door open and try to make a scene wrong, I'm going to beat you up out here. I'm going to try to beat you to death out here, dog. And I'm not playing.
You want to try to go in?
You try to make a scene, go ahead and get
Like, you ain't heard me say that?
this work, dog. Come on.
Friday or Saturday night, you're probably gonna see a fight. There's nothing in this jail worth me fighting over. Ricky's got blood all over his face. He's missing a tooth or something.
I mean, that seems successful, right? During his time as sheriff, Noel was not always squeaky clean.
More than 24 former inmates settled a federal lawsuit against the Clark County Jail.
WDRB uncovered these settlements through an open records request. Everyone involved signed confidentiality agreements, but since taxpayers ultimately funded the settlements, they have a right to know how much was paid out. This case dates back to October of 2021. Prosecutors say former Clark County Corrections Officer David Lowe sold male inmates a key to the female dorm inside the jail. Former Clark County Sheriff Jamey Noel, who was in charge of the jail at the time, vehemently denied the sexual assault claims and even created a website where he posted short clips of surveillance videos showing the inmates inside the women's dorm.
Covered evidence during those interviews through phone calls, jail-based text messages, that several female inmates threatened and intimidated other female inmates to lie about what happened and to join their lawsuit. Some female inmates talked about using this as a potential lawsuit to get their get out of jail free card, while others talked about lying in order to get big payouts. Some female inmates repeatedly told their loved ones that nothing happened over the phone or jail-based text messaging, and then dramatically changed their story later.
The settlements paid to 25 women by the county's insurance carrier total more than $328,000.
Jamey Noel's priority was to cover his own ass, and it remained that way for quite some time. Although he did get called out again in 2020 when a paternity suit was brought against him by his mistress, Brittany Furry, bringing to light the existence of a child between them. However, this didn't result in a divorce from his wife or anything else, just child support payments. And that brings us to June of 2023, when the Indiana State Police began their investigation into Jamey Noel after there were allegations that he was having jail workers do work on his personal property and home and run errands for him. As they began looking into this, they all fell down the deep rabbit hole and shit got real. In August of 23, search warrants were executed on various properties owned by Jamey Noel. And in November of 2023, November 8th, Jamey Noel, sheriff of Clark County, Indiana, for 9 years at the time, was arrested on 15 felony charges. Now, let's head to court.
For anybody that wants a copy of it.
Morning, Judge. Afternoon, Judge.
This is clause number 10, C01-2311-5297, State of Indiana versus Jamey Noel. Mr. Noel, this is your initial hearing. For the record, would you state your full name?
Jamey John Noel.
Two things. If you have a cell phone, please turn it off or put it on silent. If it disturbs the proceedings, you may have it confiscated and impose fines or other sanctions. The second thing is, if you have recording devices, if you have not been approved by the court administrators upon allow, please turn it off. Once again, if you do not, you'll be subject to contempt powers, and I will have to confiscate and then you be incarcerated for a period of time. Date of birth?
12/18/70.
And that will make you how old?
52, sir.
And the last four digits, your social security number? What's your address?
3001 Old Tay Bridge, Jeffersonville, Indiana.
You have a good contact telephone number?
Yes, I do.
What is it? Are you under the influence of any drugs, including alcohol today?
No, Your Honor.
Read and understand English language?
Yes, Your Honor.
If I say something you don't understand, will you let me know?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Noel, Special Prosecutor Hurdle has charged you with 15 counts of criminal conduct, and I'll go through it. Count 1, corrupt business influence is a level 5 felony. It would indicate that pursuant to Indiana Code 35-44-1.1-2-1, that on or about a period of time from November the 9th, 2018 and August the 16th, 2023 in Clark County, State of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally through a pattern of racketeering activity acquire or maintain, either directly or indirectly, an interest in or control of property or an enterprise contrary to the form of the statute in such case made and provided. Count 2, theft as a level 5 felony. It would indicate that pursuant to Indiana Code 35-44.1, 2-1, that on or about May 3rd, 2021 in Washington, Clark County, State of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally exert unauthorized control over the property of Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association, that being Utica, with the intent to deprive Utica of any part of the use or value of the property, said property having a value of at least $50,000. That being on May the 3rd, 2021, you traded a Utica-owned 2020 Chevrolet Corvette with a specific VIN number valued at $92,000 for a 2020 Mercedes-Benz S-Class 450 with a specific VIN number, and registered said Mercedes in your own name. Count 3, theft as a level 5 felony pursuant to Indiana Code 35-43-4-2A would indicate that between January the 2nd, 2019 and October the 10th, 2019, in Clark County, state of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally exert unauthorized control over the property of Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association, that being Utica, with the intent to deprive Utica of any part of its use or value of the property, said property having a value of at least $50,000, that being on January the 2nd, 2019, you traded a Utica-owned 2017 Chevrolet 3500 Silverado for a 2019 Challenger SRT Hellcat with a specific VIN number and titled said Hellcat in your own name on October the 10th, 2019. You then personally sold said Hellcat for $83,000, $83,716. Count 4, theft is a level 6 felony under Indiana Code 35-43-4-2A would indicate that between April the 30th, 2021 and September the 14th, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally exert unauthorized control over the property of Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association with the intent to deprive Utica of any part of the use or value of the properties, that said property having a value of at least $750 and less than $50,000, that being on April the 30th, 2021, you traded a Utica-owned vehicle in for a 2012 Porsche Panamera with specific cause number and titled said Porsche in your own name, that on September the 12th, 2022, you sold said Porsche for $32,000 to a car dealership and deposited said funds into your own personal account on September the 14th, 2022. Count 5, theft as a level 6 felony would indicate that between December the 2nd, 2020 and September the 28th, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally exert unauthorized control over the property of Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association, Utica, with the intent to deprive Utica of any part of the use or value of the property, and property having a value of at least $750 and less than $50,000. That being, on December the 2nd, 2022, you traded a Utica-owned vehicle in for a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air with a specific VIN number and titled said Chevrolet in your own name on September the 27th, 2022. You sold said Chevrolet for $39,500 to Kenny Eubanks and deposited said funds into your own personal bank account on September the 28th, 2022. Count 6, theft, would indicate that between August the 31st, 2022 and September the 14th, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally exert unauthorized control over the property of Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association with the intent to deprive Utica of any part of the use or value of the property, said property having a value of at least $750 and less than $50,000. That being on August the 11th, 2022, you took a Utica-owned Kubota HST tractor purchased in 2017 for $40,600 and sold it to James Bishop for $31,000. On September the 14th, 2022, you deposited the check for $31,000 into your own personal bank account. Count 7, obstruction of justice as a level 6 felony would indicate that on or about August the 16th, 2023, in Clark County, state of Indiana, you did knowingly or intentionally alter, damage, or remove any record, document, or thing with the intent to prevent it from being used, produced as evidence in any official proceeding or investigation. That being, you factory reset your phone upon the arrival of the Indiana State Police on your property. Count 8, ghost employment as a level 6 felony. It would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, in your capacity as Clark County Sheriff, a public servant, did knowingly or intentionally assign to Michael Bowling, an employee under your supervision, duties that were not related to the operation of the governmental agency that you served. That being, sheriff assigned Bowling duties on your personal property, rental properties, father-in-law's properties, pole barn, and property of Utica Fire Department. Count 9, ghost employment as a level 6 felony, would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 to December 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, in your capacity as Clark County Sheriff, a public servant, did knowingly or intentionally assign to Donald Jones, an employee under defendant's supervision, duties that were not related to the operation of the governmental agency that you served. That being, sheriff assigned to Jones duties on your personal property, rental properties, father-in-law's property, pole barn, and property of Utica Fire Department. Count 10, ghost employment as a level 6 felony, would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December the 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, in your capacity as Clark County Sheriff, a public servant, did knowingly or intentionally assign to Rodney Walker, an employee under your supervision, duties that were not related to the operation of the governmental agency that you served. That being, sheriff assigned robbery duties on your personal property, rental properties, father-in-law's property, pole barn, and property of Utica Fire Department. Count 11, ghost employment as a level 6 felony, would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, in your capacity as Clark County Sheriff, a public servant, did knowingly or intentionally assign to Brent Fisher, an employee under your supervision, duties that were not related to the operation of the governmental agency that you served. That being, a sheriff assigned Fisher duties on your personal property, rental properties, father-in-law's property, pole barn, and property of Utica Fire Department. Count 12, official misconduct as a level 6 felony, would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December the 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, a public servant, that being sheriff of Clark County, knowingly or intentionally committed an offense in the performance of your official duties, that being ghost employment of sheriff of Clark County relating to Mike Bowling. Count 13, official misconduct as a level 6 felony. It would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December the 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, a public servant, that being sheriff of Clark County, knowingly or intentionally committed an offense in the performance of your official duties, that being ghost employment as sheriff of Clark County relating to Donald Jones. Count 14, official misconduct as a level 6 felony, would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, a public servant, that being sheriff of Clark County, knowingly or intentionally committed an offense in the performance of your official duties, that being ghost employment as sheriff of Clark County relating to Rodney wobbly. And count 15. Official misconduct is a level 6 felony. It would indicate that between November the 9th, 2018 and December the 31st, 2022 in Clark County, state of Indiana, you, a public servant, that being Sheriff of Clark County, knowingly or intentionally committed an offense in the performance of your official duties, that being goes to employment as Sheriff of Clark County relating to Brent Fisher. Mr. Noel, the first 3 counts are level 5 felonies, which have a range of imprisonment from 1 year to 6 years, with the advisory sentence being 3 years and up to a $10,000 fine. Counts 4 through 15 are all level 6 felonies, which have a range of imprisonment of no time in jail, treated as a misdemeanor, to 2.5 years at the Indiana Department of Corrections, with the advisory sentence being 1 year and up to a $10,000 fine. Do you understand what you've been charged with?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand the potential penalties?
Yes, Your Honor.
The next question is, usually you intend to hire a lawyer, but you've obviously have counsel seated with you. I need to tell you, you have a right to a speedy public trial by jury in this county. You have the right to face all witnesses against you, severe question and cross-examine those witnesses. You have the right to have witnesses brought into court to testify on your behalf. And at your request, the court will issue subpoenas requiring those individuals to come into court to testify on your behalf or to bring evidence in. You have the right to have the state prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You have the right to remain silent. You cannot be required to give any testimony or make any statements against yourself to anyone. You do have the right to be heard in your own defense at any hearing or trial concerning the charges against you. Anything you say, however, may be used against you. Do you have any questions concerning your rights?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, by agreement of the parties, I'm going to enter a preliminary plea of not guilty for you and set this matter for a pretrial conference date on January the 8th at 1 p.m. At that time, we will also select an omnibus date. There will be a jury trial set for May the 6th, 2024, starting at 9 a.m. Do you have any questions?
We have none, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now, the next issue is State of Indiana asked that you be held without bond, at least till the initial hearing, so on. I now want to take up the issue of bond. Mr. Hurdle?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would ask the court to consider, and I believe it is required that the court consider the factors set forth in 3533.84, the amount of bail, entry of order, endorsement on warrant in lieu of order, factors relevant to risk of non-appearance. So the state would ask the court to take a look at that. Specifically, the state points the court to subsection 7, the nature and the gravity of the offense and potential penalty faced. The defendant, as the court just read, is subject to 15 counts, 15 felonies, 3 of which are level 5 felonies, 12 of which are level 6 felonies. The state believes the gravity and the nature of the offense is significant here and would ask the court to consider those in determining his bail today. The state would also cite a couple of things as risk of non-appearance. The defendant has a home in the state of Florida. Does the state have any evidence that he's going to flee or run to the state of Florida? No evidence of that, Your Honor, but I do believe it's important for the court to at least consider that there is a home there. The state would also point out that the defendant owns his own plane and has access to a plane that certainly allows him to come and go outside the state of Indiana at his leisure. The state would also point out that the defense has filed a brief on the defendant's bond or recognizance conditions, and outlined in that brief, it does specifically say, in fact, he voluntarily availed himself of the court when he became aware that the Indiana State Police had potentially secured a warrant for his arrest. He traveled with his attorney, Larry O. Wilder, to the courthouse and waited in the circuit court 1 for multiple hours, presenting himself voluntarily at the lobby of the Clark County Jail. The state doesn't dispute that, Your Honor, but I think that only tells a snapshot of the story that happened yesterday, because I agree with part of it. The state police were waiting for a warrant to drop after the charges were filed yesterday, and in fact made contact with him in an attempt to basically locate him. They followed him for a period of time. Flee might be a strong term, but he certainly went to the state of Kentucky and attempted to elude them for a significant period of time, ultimately parking his vehicle on the street in Louisville, getting into a car with his attorney in Kentucky. So I think that adds a little bit of a difference and a different flavor than what the defense posed, that he's basically sitting in the courtroom here waiting and then turning himself into the lobby, because earlier in the day, he's running from the Indiana State Police, bouncing around in a truck in Indiana and then to the state of Kentucky. So I think the state should consider that as well in determining his bail. The state is not in possession of any IRAS. I know he was evaluated today. I believe the statute does require the court to consider the IRAS as well.
I was given one a little bit earlier.
Okay, thank you. And I would ask the court to consider whatever that might be, Your Honor. Further, the state would ask the court to consider if and when the defendant posts bond, that he be placed on some sort of monitoring device, whether that be a bracelet of some sort of in-home incarceration, work privileges, or something of that nature. And if the court is maybe not inclined to do that, then a day reporting of some sort to the probation department or court services here in Clark County, or court services in a neighboring county because of the connections the defendant has here in Clark County. And lastly, Your Honor, the state would ask the defendant to turn over all of his weapons to the Indiana State Police so that they may be kept. As subsection B points out, defendant could pose a risk to the physical safety of another person or the community. The state is aware that pursuant to the search warrant that was executed in August of this year on at least one of his properties, there were a multitude of weapons that were there. The state did not seize those weapons, as there was not a warrant for those and he was not illegally possessing those that the state is aware of. But in factoring bond, and once he does post bond, those weapons the state believes ought to be turned over to the Indiana State Police for safekeeping as well. All that being said, Your Honor, the state would ask for a bond in the amount of $25,000 to $30,000 posted by cash by the defendant. The state believes that is reasonable under these circumstances, and again asking the court to review the factors set forth in Indiana Code along with the IRAS and those that the state just laid out for the court today.
Mr. Earl, you indicated there was a multitude of firearms. What kind of firearms were they? And
One moment, Your Honor.
approximate numbers.
Your Honor, in talking to the detective who is handling and overseeing this investigation, there were assault rifles, shotguns, and handguns as well, Your Honor. Thank you, Judge.
The state rests, and there's an argument.
I suspect they'll want some rebuttal, but
most
for the time being, Mr.
Certainly,
Hall,
Judge.
your turn.
So first, Judge, we all know that bond issues require evidence, and as we know, what lawyers say is not evidence. I've seen no evidence. We call Chris Tinman to the stand, Judge.
Senator, before you have a seat, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Have a seat.
Thank you, Judge.
For the record, tell me your name.
Chris Tidman, T-I-D-M-A-N, and I'm with the Pretrial Services Probation.
You can have a seat. So, your professional address?
501 East Courthouse.
Jefferson, Illinois.
Mr. Tinman, I'm sorry, thanks, Judge. Mr. Tinman, can you tell the judge what your qualifications are that provided you with the ability to provide pretrial services in Clark County, Indiana?
I've been with Pretrial Services for 4 years. I'm a Bachelor of Science in Sociology, as well as training through the Indiana State government.
And that's training in providing,
For the Indiana risk assessment.
so when we say IRS, we're saying Indiana risk assessment, correct? So to prepare your Indiana risk assessment in this matter, did you review the CCS chronological case summary?
Yeah, we do a limited background check as well as conduct an interview with the defendant to come up with the IRS score.
And we agree that when you looked at the charges filed, Mr. Noel is not charged with murder, correct?
Yes.
Nor is he charged with treason, right? Which are non-bondable offenses in Indiana, right? The only way you can keep somebody in jail without bond in Indiana is they're charged with murder and treason, correct? And in fact, when you reviewed his criminal history, you determined, or did you find that my client has ever been charged with a crime in Indiana?
I did not locate any involvements. There was one very old involvement that was abolished, but other than that, there was no.
Traffic infraction.
Right.
So he has had a traffic infraction in his lifetime. And when you reviewed the information and got the evidence together to provide this information to the court, did you notice whether he was on probation or parole from any unrelated offense?
He's not currently on any active supervision.
So you're familiar with Indiana Trial Rule 26, correct? Which is what makes you have to do this, right? So in considering your recommendations or what the IRS says, the reasoning should be that no bond for arrest, or excuse me, for murder or treason, correct? Doesn't apply, right? No bond for someone who has pre-trial detention in other places or is on probation parole, correct?
Yes.
Doesn't apply. And that you review whether or not that this new offense has something to do with any other old offense, correct?
Yes, all those factors combine into the.
And none of them apply to Mr. Noel, do they?
He scored a low on our IRS.
And how low can you go on an IRS and be the lowest you can be?
That would be a 0.
And what is Mr. Noel's score?
He scored a 0 on our IRS.
So based upon what Indiana Supreme Court's adopted through this trial rule, which is evidence, right, that the finding is that he has a 0 risk of flight, correct?
He would be a low risk of flight. He scored a 0 on the IRS.
And with having scored a 0, we agree that the Indiana pretrial release rule says that he should be released on his own recognizance, correct?
Yes, and I put him as a level 3 on the supervision.
And what's level 3 supervision? So Judge Medlock understands, because he's from Washington County, we have different things here. What's a level 3?
I'm from the country.
Yeah. That's not correct, Judge, Washington County.
Level 3 is our lowest level of supervision.
Which is what?
Is 1 monthly contact with an officer in person.
Now, you heard the government's argument through its special prosecutor as to what they recommended the detention be. Could you enlighten us all as to what he's asked for? What level would that be of supervision?
Right now, currently, we don't do any HIP, but that would be level 1, which would be the most restrictive.
And what is, when somebody's on the most restrictive type of pretrial release, in your experience and based upon your time doing what you've done, what are the crimes that usually constitute that?
It would more so be with any past pretrial FTAs, or a risk of if they don't have a stable residence and things like that would be more so related to the amount of contact that we would like to have.
So what he's asked for is the highest, which is for the most prominent criminal offense and criminals, correct? And what he grades is the lowest, which is 0.
Yeah, he scored.
And that's the evidence, right?
He scored a low, yes.
And that's the evidence. And you were aware that Mr. Noel and his lawyers waited until there was a warrant signed, correct?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, then I have no further questions, because that would not be evidence, because you don't have personal knowledge.
Yeah.
Judge, I would move in the IRS as evidence as it relates to what bond should be, and we would just ask that the law set out criminal trial rule 26 be followed, and that our client be released on his own recognizance at the level of supervision that seems to be appropriate based upon the evidence presented by this witness who's qualified to testify.
Any objections to the admission?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
I'll show. Committed as defendant's exhibit A.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's acceptable. Cross-examination, Mr. Herbal.
Mr. Tibbin, I guess maybe I don't fully understand, or maybe in Ripley County we use the IRS for something different. Is it your testimony that if someone scores a 0, they should be released on their own recognizance each and every time, no matter what the charge?
No, sir. I don't
Okay, because
have.
that's what I got.
Judge, could he answer? He wasn't finished. He asked a question. Can he answer?
Is that an objection?
It is an objection. He cut the witness off and he wasn't finished answering.
Response, Mr. Herbal?
I'll withdraw the question.
Thank
and
you.
ask it again, Your Honor.
You may.
So all due respect, I'll repeat the question, Mr. Tibbin. Is it your testimony today that if someone scores a 0 on the IRAS, the court should just release them on their own recognizance?
No, sir. That decision is up to the judge. I can only simply make an IRAS recommendation and a supervision level recommendation.
And so you're not saying bond should be at 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. You're talking about once bond potentially is posted, what the supervision level you're at least recommending?
Through our pretrial services program, you could be released on your own recognizance to pretrial. You could have a bond and then report to pretrial as well.
Okay. Now, who employs pretrial services in Clark County?
It'd be the Clark County government.
Okay. So who do you report to?
Who do I report
Yes.
to? The chief probation officer and then the judges.
Okay. Do you work with the sheriff's department at all?
Directly in the mornings, they get together our defendants for interviews in the morning. But as far as like a face-to-face, not daily. But we do communicate with the jail every day to get our defendants for interviews.
So they provide you information and access to their inmates?
They provide us the ability to talk to the inmates for the CR 26 interviews.
And you said you've been employed for 4 years?
Yes, sir.
And during those 4 years, was the defendant the Clark County Sheriff at that time?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you had to receive permission, at least at some point in time, from him or his employees to access those same different defendants for the IRS, is that right?
I've never personally communicated with Mr. Noel, to my knowledge, but I do communicate with his staff through the jail, through the interviews.
And obviously, just like the staff now reports to Sheriff Maples, at one point in time, that staff reported to then Sheriff Noel. Do you feel comfortable supervising somebody like Mr. Noel?
Judge, I want to object to the characterization of the question. Somebody like Mr. Noel? Are we talking about somebody that scores a 0 on the IRS? What are we trying to imply? Somebody like Mr. Noel?
State the objection, Mr. Wilder.
I object to the characterization of the question. It implies something that is nefarious as it relates to my client. There's no evidence. There's still no evidence from the state of anything.
Response, Mr. Herbal?
Your Honor, it was no attempt to be nefarious. It was an attempt, basically, to ask him if he felt comfortable supervising the ex-sheriff in Clark County.
Overruled, you may answer.
Thank you, Judge.
I understand what you're asking. I don't personally
I do too. I think
supervise.
Mr. Wilder did too.
I do the assessments. So in terms of me personally supervising him, I wouldn't be in that role. But I understand what you're asking, and I wouldn't really have an opinion on that one way or another. If I was asked to do something, that's what I'm asked to do.
So that might be a question for one of your superiors, the chief probation officer, or someone else, how they would feel about supervising someone like Jamey Noel.
That would be a question for the chief probation officer on how they would like to handle a former employee of the Clark County government branch being supervised.
Above your pay grade.
Yeah, if you want to phrase it like that. Sure.
Do you know the defendant?
Just as the sheriff, but not personally.
Do you have any personal knowledge of any of the accusations made in the criminal information against the defendant?
Just what I did on a report from copying the charges over.
Have you always been in pretrial services here?
Yes, sir.
You live in Clark County?
Yes, sir.
Was any of this a surprise to you?
Judge, I'll object. Relevance. Thank you, Judge.
Judge, I don't believe I have any other questions at this time.
Just one, Judge. Was there anything that Mr. Hurdle asked you that caused those findings on that piece of paper to change?
No, sir. What I put on the paper is what he scored.
Thank you. No question.
Court has a question.
Yes, sir.
How do I, besides this one, how do you pronounce your last name?
Tidman.
Tidman?
Yep.
Mr. Tidman, how many times have you done a pretrial assessment on a past public official and a current, public figure that has an airplane and that allegedly has a lot of other people's money and government taxpayer?
This would be a unique situation.
Be a unique situation. That prompts any questions from either side.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
I have no, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you can step in. Any other witnesses, Mr. Wilder?
Your Honor, at this time we've provided all the evidence that's necessary, we believe, to support our argument pursuant to Trial Rule 26.
Mr. Wilder, I have not had, I was given your brief just moments before I came out here. Would you like to summarize it for me?
Your Honor, there's really no need to summarize the brief because what really matters is the government provided zero evidence. Lawyers' words are not evidence. Statements that Mr. Hurdle made are not evidence. We do evidence-based bonds now. The trial rule is clear. The statutes are clear. The only evidence before the court today is what we heard from the gentleman who's trained to make that determination as to what his IRS is. The only thing we follow based upon that is what the Supreme Court of Indiana has told us we follow. Trial Rule 26. He is not charged with murder. He is not charged with treason. He was not on pre-trial release for an unrelated matter. He has never been arrested, and he is not on probation or parole or under a community supervision program. The Supreme Court states that the IRS indicates that he is not a risk of flight. Therefore, we ask the court to place him on level 3 supervision and that he be released today on his recognizance.
Mr. Hurdle?
Your Honor, the state will rest on its prior evidence that was placed before the court in the my first round. I think probably to clear up the record, the state has no issue with Mr. Tidman in pretrial services in Clark County. I think the state is trying to be cognizant, as the court is, of potentially supervising an ex-sheriff, a public figure, someone like Mr. Noel. No nefariety noted there either. But if Clark County is in a position that they want to supervise, and if the court feels that ultimately after bail is posted, the pretrial services in this county are most appropriate, then by all means do it. But I think that there certainly could be some at least perceived conflicts. Hence, that's why the Indiana State Police is investigating this. Hence why there's a special prosecutor involved. Hence why there's a special judge involved, because Clark County has removed itself from that equation. So that's the only intent that the state was doing that. Nothing personal or untoward with Mr. Tidman. So the state would ask the court to consider that in any determination it makes today with respect to bail.
I have no concern with Mr. Tidman in regards to his veracity or the assessment. Mr. Waller, did you want to say something?
Judge, I was only going to once again state the only evidence in this hearing today is the testimony from Mr. Tidman and the document that was put into evidence. Nothing we say as lawyers is evidence. They presented no evidence. That is the burden they had. to present evidence by preponderance of the evidence to ask you for anything more than he be released on his own recognizance.
Does your client have a passport?
He does, but I think it was, do they leave your passport to you? He does have a passport, and we will turn it in, Judge.
I'm going to think about it at least a short time before I issue a ruling in regards to the bond. I think there's at least one other issue that I need to address in a different cause number. Do we need to do something technically to address that? We can continue in this cause number, or in this recording.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Cause number 10C01-2307 MC 1423, that being in the matter of the investigation by the Indiana State Police. I was also handed this not too long ago. There was a motion to unseal the records in regards to the investigation. Mr. Wilder, do you...
We have no objection, Judge. We welcome the unsealing of all those documents for the public and for us to have an opportunity to review.
All right, then I'll order that matter to be unsealed. So I expect the clerk and the court will have a feeding frenzy from the media here in a short period of time. Mr. Hurdle, is there anything else that needs to be addressed today?
Now, from the state, Your Honor, is the court's intent to take a brief recess and make a decision, or are we going to adjourn for the day?
I'm going to take a brief recess. I'm going to take a brief recess, and then I'll decide whether we're going to adjourn for the day.
Thank
you.
you.
Just stick around. Mr. Wilder?
And Judge, so long as our client remains here and he's not transported back to Scott County, while we wait for your determination, that would be...
Well, I'll decide that in a few minutes.
Yes.
And just for the public's knowledge, I was assigned to the special investigation, and I signed, as I'm sure a lot of you folks know, the search warrants and subpoenas. Because there was a new case filed, the setting judge had to recuse himself, and I had to wait until I received notice from the Supreme Court that I had been assigned to this particular case. That notice came at about 10 to 4 yesterday afternoon, and thus I could not assume jurisdiction or take any action in regards to the issuance of the arrest warrant until that occurred, and that's one reason Mr. Wilder and Mr. Noel sat in the gallery for a period of time, and I assume if he had been arrested in Kentucky, there would have been probably a week before he could have been extradited. So it's probably good advice you give him to get back to Indiana, Mr. Wilder.
We met at Mr. McMahon's office to come to Indiana for the purpose of making sure we afforded ourselves the jurisdiction of the great state of Indiana.
Anything else, Mr. Earl?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Wilder?
Nothing, Judge.
I'll be off record for a few minutes while I think about
Thanks,
what
Judge.
I need to do.
You can be seated again if you like, if not, you can stand.
Wilder, I'll accept your offer. He will surrender his passport to you by noon tomorrow, and then you will surrender it to the court by 4 p.m. next Monday, because it's my understanding the court here is closed tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
He will surrender all firearms except one shotgun of his choice to Indiana State Police. Being from the country, or as Mr. Wilder said, Washington County, I keep my shotgun with double-aught near me, along with my .45, but I think one shotgun for personal protection is appropriate for him to maintain. He will not leave the state of Indiana without permission of the court, and they'll post $75,000 in cash. Mr. Noel, this is a unique case. Mr. Wilder, I know you wanted him released without posting any bond, but it's a unique case, and if you don't like my decision, I'm happy for you to appeal it. It won't be the first time you've appealed me, and the Court of Appeals told you I was right, so I'm happy for you to accept that challenge if you so please. I'm not going to have you report in. I think there's enough media attention, there's enough public eyes out there that if you do anything stupid, it'll be brought before the attention of the court. So I implore you not to do anything stupid.
Judge, if I may, could we bring the firearms to the court to be inventoried before we provide them to the state police? Because the vehicles that were returned to my client were damaged and the brake lines were cut in one of those vehicles. So we would prefer to have an inventory of his firearms, that the court staff sets up photographs of those firearms before we give them to the entity that's returned damaged property to us. And then the second question, Your Honor, is obviously when money was, we're going to post the $75,000 at $5, but that money obviously has been put in my trust account. Therefore, I will be, is it sufficient to sign a trust check from my trust account to pay to the bond? Because getting $75,000, walking around with $75,000 in cash bothers me, Judge, and it all went into the bank.
I'm not sure what the, I don't have any concerns with your trust check, Mr. Wilder. I don't know what the policy is for the clerk.
They accept my trust checks, Judge.
And that's fine. Mr. Hurl, in regards to the issue of the inventory of the firearms, what's your position?
Your Honor, the state is prepared to accept those either from the court to the state police or directly to the state police. I believe that either one is appropriate. If it's going to assure him some peace of mind that something's not going to be damaged, the state probably would contend that there was nothing returned to him damaged, but that's for another day, Your Honor.
I understand. Mr. Wilder, I don't know that the court has the ability to inventory the firearms. I don't even know how many firearms he has.
Judge, could we allow the Jeffersonville Police Department to inventory the firearms, photograph the firearms, and then transfer them to the state police?
I don't have jurisdiction over that.
If the Jeffersonville Police would do that, Judge, is that sufficient?
No. Here's what you may do.
Yes, sir.
When they're surrendered, have someone from your team be there to monitor.
Yes, sir.
Take photographs of them as they're surrendered to show the condition that they're in. That's fine.
Yes, sir.
You can do it one by one. When can that be accomplished? And Mr. Noel.
Yes, sir.
You keep one shotgun only. Try to deceive me, you will not like the consequences.
Yes, sir.
Understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then, Judge, the issue of return of all other items seized, we can just take them in another hearing?
Well, it wasn't set for today, so
No.
yeah, we'll deal with that at another time. I assume now that everything's going to be unsealed, there'll be a lot of new things brought before the court that
Yes, sir.
we'll address in due time.
Thanks, Judge.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Nothing else from us, Judge. Thank you.
All right, we'll be off record. Thank you all.
New court records just unsealed today. They reveal police took dozens of cars and more than $50,000 in cash from drawers and dressers after searching Jamey Noel's home, properties he owned, businesses he ran, and those belonging to relatives.
Following the initial hearing, Special Judge Larry Medlock issued his order, which said that the court advised the defendant of his charges, rights, potential penalties. The court enters the preliminary plea of not guilty. The court sets the defendant's bond at $75,000 cash, which he promptly paid. The defendant is ordered to surrender his passport. The defendant shall surrender all of his firearms except one shotgun. The defendant shall remain in the state of Indiana. The court may consider permission for him to leave upon request. The defendant is ordered to appear for a pretrial conference, and that a jury trial was scheduled for May of 2024. An appeal was filed to this ruling on December 7th, 2023. Even when the defendant has posted bond in a criminal case, the amount and conditions of the bond are not moot because the public interest exception to mootness applies. The trial court abused its discretion by failing to make specific factual findings that supported the court's denial of Noel's release on his own recognizance, and that the trial court abused discretion because the factors outlined in Indiana Code 33-33-84B did not support the trial court's judgment on the amount and conditions of bond. There is an associated 25-page motion that I will post on Patreon for you to review if you so choose. The Court of Appeals ultimately upheld the trial court's original orders.
As Jamey Noel awaits trial in his theft and official misconduct case, investigators say he unlawfully paid child support to another politician. Investigators say over the summer, they were tipped off that Noel had a child with Brittany Faree, who served on Clark County Council from 2019 to 2022. In a probable cause statement used to search her home in Sellersburg on December 29th, they say Noel initially denied being the father, but they found records of him being ordered to pay child support. They also found checks like this one for $2,200 from the Utica Township Volunteer Firefighters Association, doing business as New Chapel EMS and going to state collectors. Noel paid over $25,000 in child support and did not declare the payments on his taxes. It's unclear exactly how much of that came from his businesses. The special prosecutor said today he was prepared to bring criminal charges against Misty Noel, Jamey Noel's wife. The judge even hinted that she might be arrested in the courtroom on Tuesday. That didn't happen, and they need to make sure they know how to bring those charges, but it led to a passionate response from the defense team that it was not the right way to bring it up.
I could arrest her myself according to the statute.
Seated just one row behind her husband, lawyers discussed how and when Misty Noel will be brought into the case.
And I find it a tad bit disheartening that this is how the government's approach to today's proceeding was.
So far, the former sheriff has been accused of using taxpayer money to buy a plane, selling cars out of a volunteer firefighters association, and not declaring child support payments on his taxes. The state prosecutor didn't specify what kind of charges could be coming Misty's way.
The state is now prepared to move forward on criminal charges against certain defendants, primarily Misty Noel.
Rick Hurdle was looking for guidance on how to bring the charges because a special judge has been brought in for the Jamey Noel investigation with no mention of his wife. The judge was willing to have a hearing right then and there.
If you want to arrest her, she's sitting in Chair 2, front row.
Well, I gotta have probable cause before I can do that.
Defense attorney Larry Wilder objected to her being arrested when the jurisdiction and bond was not clear.
Just to punish them in advance seems a little bit like a strategy that is outside the bounds of all of the trial rules that have been invoked by the Supreme Court.
Hurdle didn't want to have a probable cause hearing Tuesday, and the two sides will make sure of the proper way to do it, but the charges could be coming any day.
More breaking news at 5. WHAS 11 News has learned late today that the wife of the former Clark County, Indiana Sheriff Jamey Noel, Misty Noel, you see her right here, has been charged in his ongoing investigation. Court records in Clark Circuit Court are showing she's charged with alleged theft and tax evasion.
Well, Scott, you'll remember behind me on last week, Misty Noel was taken into custody. Before she made her court appearance today, she did have a special request. It was to appear in court in her own clothing. As you're about to see, the answer was no, which meant she was brought to court today in handcuffs, shackles, and a green jail-issued jumpsuit. She spent the weekend locked up at the Scott County Detention Center.
The Indiana State Board of Accounts releasing its findings after an audit of the New Chapel EMS and included photographs. Here's your first look.
The investigation found Jamey Noel had little to no oversight of his spending. In the report, they say there is no evidence the board of directors had any function. The four-person board did not approve contracts, didn't approve purchases, and reviewed no budget since 2019. The report also outlined more purchases made by Jamey Noel, including more than $20,000 in political donations through the New Chapel American Express card. The report claims that he made them on the conservative website WinRed. We're also getting a look inside the Noel barn, where these photos show he stored his classic car collection. You can see in these pictures cars stacked up on top of each other. Those lifters also purchased using New Chapel funds. Under wraps right here, you can also see a vintage police car. That's not all. These household appliances, including double wall ovens and a new refrigerator, were purchased with $16,000 from the New Chapel EMS charge card. And then there's this single-engine plane bought in 2022. Reports show Noel tried to transfer the ownership of the plane to New Chapel EMS after multiple search warrants were carried out by Indiana State Police in 2023.
The daughter of former Clark County Sheriff Jamey Noel remains in jail after her arrest Friday, charged with 9 felonies. Casey Noel appeared in court this morning, becoming the third member of her family to be arrested in recent months. Casey's charged with 5 counts of theft and 4 counts of tax evasion. Court documents allege she spent $96,000 over a 3-year span on an American Express card from the Utica Township Volunteer Firefighter Association. Purchase describes as personal, including clothing, Netflix, and tanning. Investigators then said Casey failed to report that money as personal income. And while she has not yet filed this year's tax return, it's believed she spent another $12,000. During discussions of Casey's bond, the defense argued she's indicated she's not a high risk, even turning herself in. But the prosecution disagreed, hinting at a larger problem surrounding all 3 family members in this case.
Casey spent a lot of the past week, the past few days, with me, because we expected that by the end of this week, there'd be a warrant for her in this case.
Your Honor, with all due respect, this is the 3rd defendant charged in this matter, and each one of them knew specifically when the warrant was issued under seal. The state believes that I have no idea even how Jamey Noel, Misty Noel, and now Casey Noel know that a warrant drops in a confidential document under seal so much that they can turn themselves in when the warrant is issued. The state has some concerns about that information somehow being provided to the Noel family.
A big question today. Casey's attorney says she anticipated charges in that case because a detective gave her a call earlier in the week.
The family of Noel's late brother Leon has filed a petition to reopen his estate. They claim Jamey ripped them off and instead enriched himself and his daughter. Leon died in 2018, and Jamey was made the controller of the estate. Focus reporter Travis Breeze tells us what the family is hoping to get.
They are in disbelief. What they've shared with me was that this was such a low point for them. They had just lost their father, and, you know, he completely took advantage of them.
Attorney Amy Wheatley in New Albany is representing the 3 children of William Leon Noel. Leon died in 2018 and his estate closed in 2020. On February 9th, police said they were investigating the estate and had proof that Jamey profited as controller. He allegedly sold Leon's house to his own daughter, Casey, for $180,000 and gave her $36,000 of equity in the house. Police say that money should have gone to Leon's kids.
Each one of the heirs received a distribution, but it is our contention that it was not all that they were entitled to.
In March, contempt charges were filed against Jamey Noel, alleging he failed to abide by the court's November 19th, 2023 order, where it said that the defendant shall surrender all of his firearms to the Indiana State Police, with the exception of 1 shotgun, and being informed on the record at the initial hearing. The court, after reviewing the return for the search warrant number 45, shows that the Indiana State Police seized 2 Smith & Wesson MNP9 semi-auto pistols. A show-cause hearing was scheduled.
C012403 MC634. While we were in the other room, there was legal arguments and potential resolution of the issue. You'll notice that Ms. Collada is not here, and with her permission, we are going to commence the rule of show cause hearing. Mr. Herbert. How about this? Anybody that's going to testify, please stand and raise your right hand. Anybody. We got everybody? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury, testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. You can have a seat. Call your first witness, Mr. Hurley.
Your Honor, Your Honor, before we begin, we'd like to make a separation of witnesses, please.
I think that would be appropriate. Granted. Except the state may have a representative to set a table.
Just, if we could just briefly, just to make a procedural question we have, and would like to raise with the court is, we'd like to understand and make sure that we are here relative to an indirect contempt filing on an issue today. And if that is correct, we would just ask that the procedures in Indiana Code 34-47-3-7 and ask for the appointment of a special judge relative to the requirements for indirect contempt findings in the state of Indiana. Thank you, Judge.
Old Bay Bridge, Jamey Noel's residence. And are you familiar with that residence? I am. Have you been there before? Yes. Mr. Mitchell, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 1. Would you take a look at State's Exhibit 1?
Okay.
What is State's Exhibit 1?
That's 3001 Old Bay Bridge. Jamey Noel's residence.
Is that the same address you just were speaking about assisting with a search warrant on March 13th?
It is.
Does that appear to be truly and accurately reflective of the outside of the residence on Tay Bridge?
It does.
No objection to State's Exhibit 1, Your Honor.
So State's Exhibit number 1 admitted without objection.
Your Honor, State moved to admit.
Admitted.
Detective, were you in charge of the search warrant or the scene at Old Tay Bridge Road on March 13th?
I was not.
And who were you taking direction from?
Lieutenant Jeff Herron with the Indiana State Police.
Did you have any contact with the defendant, Jamey Noel, on that day?
I saw him, but I didn't communicate with him.
Did you have any conversation at all?
I did not.
What was your role once you got to Tay Bridge and you went into the home?
To help search.
And do you recall what you were searching for?
We were searching for Tom James suits and apparel, shoes, belts.
Were you searching for anything else with respect to Tom James clothing?
Any receipts or documents associated with those items.
Were you provided any type of lists of apparel items or things that you were specifically looking for?
I was.
Who provided that to you?
Lieutenant Jeff Herron.
Was that prior to the search or once you got to Tay Bridge?
Once we got to the location.
How was it decided where you were going to be searching specifically yourself?
We just kind of communicated upstairs once the scene was secured, and I volunteered to go downstairs and start in the basement.
Can you describe the basement to the judge?
Your Honor, when you walk down into the basement, it opens up into a large living room type area, family room. There's another door that if you continue down the stairs, it goes into a back room, which is a movie theater area. And then I centered focused my search to the left when you walked into the back room, which was a table area where there was some Tom James suits and apparel.
Was the basement a finished basement or a concrete basement?
Well, it was finished with the exception of one part, which was kind of storage. There were shelves in there.
Were there any living areas in the basement?
I do believe there was at least one bedroom downstairs.
Did you go to the basement alone or with any other troopers and or other state police employees?
I don't remember if I was down there alone at any one given time, and I don't remember who went with me. There were various people that came down with me during the search.
Detective, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes, States Exhibits 2, 3, and 4. Do you recognize States 2, 3, and 4?
I do.
What are they?
These are pictures of the area. When you come down the stairs and go into the back room to the left, this is the table and the area where I focused my initial search in the basement.
So 2, 3, and 4 are a basement area?
Correct.
Why did you go to this specific area? Were you searching for something specific there?
Well, when I first got to the residence, Mr. Noel took Lieutenant Herron downstairs. I followed, and he was showing Lieutenant Herron where the areas in the house where there were Tom James suits and apparel, and that was one of the areas that he pointed out, and I was present when that happened. And that's why I focused my search down there. Not to mention, you could also see some containers, little shopping bags that were John or Tom James apparel bags. So that's why I focused my search there.
Did the defendant specifically show you and Detective Herron this location?
He did.
Do those truly and accurately reflect the area in the basement where he directed you to?
It does.
Your Honor, we do not have any objection to States Exhibit 2, 3, and 4.
State would move to admit States 2, 3, and 4, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 2, 3, and 4 admitted without objection.
Your Honor, if I could use these with the
You may.
witness. I want to direct your attention to States Exhibit 2, Detective. Did you take the photograph?
I did not.
But does it truly and accurately reflect what you saw there?
It does.
Okay. I want to direct your attention specifically to a black object sticking out of a box.
Okay.
Did you see this object when you were conducting your search?
I did.
What is it?
It's a shotgun.
Was that shotgun examined in any way, shape, or form?
It was. I looked to see if it was loaded.
Okay. And why did you do that?
Well, I mean, I'm in that area searching, and firearms are dangerous.
Did that cause you any kind of concern if there was a shotgun there?
It did not.
Now, the States 3 and 4 These two photographs focus on a white box with a black box inside of those. Do you recognize those as well?
I do.
And is that how they looked when you saw them?
They do.
Okay. Did you look inside of that large white box?
I did.
Okay, for what purpose?
We're looking for any receipts, documents, belts, and other apparel.
Okay. Did anything cause you any type of concern in that box?
Well, when I moved the chair out, inside that box was 2 Smith & Wesson boxes, which Smith & Wesson is a firearm.
And that's something you're familiar with, being a police officer for nearly 30 years?
I am.
Okay. Smith & Wesson is a brand?
It is.
Okay. Did you examine the contents of the box?
I did.
And what was inside the box?
2 firearms, handguns.
Did they appear to be loaded?
I don't believe they were.
Once you noticed these 2 firearms, what did you do?
I notified Detective Chris Hansen and Lieutenant Jeff Herron.
And just for the record purposes, Detective, you're talking about in State's Exhibit 2, the center of the picture, white box, black box, and inside of it with you can at least see it says Smith on it?
Yes.
Okay. And then in State's Exhibit 3, you're talking about the white box on the chair?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you notify Detective Herron once you located these 2 firearms?
Well, it was my responsibility to let him know, having been here for the initial hearing and hear the judge order the defendant to only possess a shotgun. When I found the firearms, it was my responsibility to notify the lead detective, Lieutenant Jeff Herron, and I did.
Obviously, those 2 Smith & Wesson were not shotguns.
They were not.
You saw a shotgun there and it didn't cause you any concern other than to make sure it was unloaded.
Correct.
You stated that you were here for a initial hearing with this particular defendant, with this particular judge.
I was.
Were you present when he was, I guess, told what he could keep and what he couldn't keep?
Yes,
Is that why you contacted Detective Herron?
it was.
Did you physically take these guns into your possession at the time?
I did not.
Ultimately, did the Indiana State Police take them into their possession?
They did.
Your Honor, may I approach you? You might have an opportunity to look at the court's view.
Detective, states 2, 3, and 4 that Mr. Wilder.
Mr. Wilder, you want to?
Yes.
States 2, 3, and 4. The chair was partially pushed under a table at the time, or all the way under the table?
I believe it was all the way under the table.
Okay. The items that were located on top of the table, did you examine any of those items?
I did.
What were some of those items?
There were, what I recall mainly was a cowboy hat and cowboy western footwear, boots.
Did they appear to be men's, women's, or you couldn't tell?
I think men's.
And this is the area that the defendant directed you, Detective Herron, to?
Correct.
Did you find any Tom James apparel, suits, belts, shoes, or anything like that in that particular area as well?
I did.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions for Detective Mitchell.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Detective. I want to talk to you a little bit about your role. You got on March 13th, you were asked to get a search warrant together, is that it?
I did.
Okay. And when you do that, how do you do that? You call somebody?
I was called by Lieutenant Jeff Herron sometime that morning. He told me he was going to be executing a search warrant and asked me that if I would get a couple troopers and a couple detectives.
How many troopers did you go into that house with?
2 troopers.
And how many detectives?
I believe 4.
Okay, so you got 6 people plus yourself.
Well, there was a crime scene technician as well, and I believe there was
That's
someone
7.
there. Pardon me?
That's 7. Who
Okay.
else?
There would have been someone there from State Board of Accounts as well.
Okay. Do you normally, when you execute a search warrant, you bring somebody from the State Board of Accounts?
Not in any of the cases that I've worked.
Not in
except-
all the 29 years you've worked at the state police, have you ever taken anybody from the State Board of Accounts in on a search warrant?
Not me personally, but this isn't the first time that someone's from State Board of Accounts has been there.
Okay, but there's at least 7 to 8 people going into that house, correct?
Correct.
Now, who was in charge of that search? You?
Lieutenant Jeff Herron.
Okay, so Lieutenant Herron's the one giving the orders?
Correct.
Is it, and that's how it works in your office?
That is correct.
Okay. And when Lieutenant Herron, he would have assigned, because it's a large house, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, how many rooms?
I do not know.
More than 10?
Yes.
Okay. Finished, unfinished?
Most of it was finished with the exception of the basement area where the dogs were at.
Okay. And what you had for the request of the search warrant were for clothing, is that correct?
Clothing and documents and receipts associated with those clothing.
Okay. Well, I noticed in the return of the search warrant, there isn't anything listed where you got any of this material. In other words, let me look you and see if you could refresh your recollection and tell me on item 2000, where'd you get it?
I didn't fill out this, I didn't collect any clothing. I didn't fill this out.
Well, let me understand something. You got all these people in there to search a house, correct? Lieutenant Herron is in charge, okay? And you go to a closet to get something. Don't you document where you got it, how you got it? Take a picture of it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me from that return, tell the court what a return is?
A return is a document that's completed by law enforcement after they execute a search warrant to notify the court of what items were taken during that search.
Does it also supposed to indicate to the court where they came from?
I do not, in my 29 years, I don't believe so. If
You've
it is,
never put
if it is,
on-
you've educated me today.
Okay, you've never put on anything in a search warrant where it came from?
On a search warrant or search warrant return?
Return.
On a search warrant return, I've never put anything in there about where something was recovered from.
So it's up to the court to, or anybody, we have to guess. Wonder where you got that?
Well, from that document you would, but there's a police report that should identify then where those items were found.
But I'm only looking at what you file with the court, the return.
Okay.
So the court doesn't have any idea where you got any of this stuff, does it?
With that document?
Yes, sir.
With the exception of 3001 Old Tay Bridge, you're correct.
Okay. And that is true for every item that you seize that day. There's no indication where it came from.
Well, I mean, I can look at it again, but I didn't complete that document and I didn't seize any evidence.
Okay.
So I'm
But
just
somebody
gonna-
did.
Right.
And somebody's required to fill out a return that says, A, where they got it, what it was. Is that correct?
So this document that you have here for me to look at is an Indiana State Police Property Record Receipt Form.
Okay.
Which is where you put the item down that you give the item and number.
Okay.
And then you give a description of items submitted, which is right here.
Right. But you
And
don't
that's
give
what-
any
That's
description.
what these are, but there's nowhere on this form for anyone to put, unless I guess you could write in that you found this item here, this item there, but this form is for items submitted.
Sure.
It's like an inventory.
Yeah, and it would be helpful to know where you got it, wouldn't it? In a large house with all these items.
Certainly it'd be helpful, but that's gonna be documented in a police
Well,
report.
it'd be technical,
For me.
wouldn't it? It'd be very helpful to be technical and say exactly where I got something and what it was, correct?
Correct, on a police report, that's what would be there.
So you've got 7 to 8 people going through this house. And Lieutenant Herron is the one that directs where you go, is that correct?
I mean, there's discussion in advance, like, okay, we've got this house to search, we have a crime scene technician that's gonna photograph everything, and then we're gonna just kind of communicate, and and go about it in an organized fashion. And I said, I will go to the basement.
Very often what you do, don't you, is you go to a location, you see a piece of evidence, then the crime scene technician takes a picture of what evidence you found. Is that right? Is that correct?
Well, yes, but like in this case, the crime scene technician took photos prior to the search.
I understand that.
Then the search is conducted, item is found, you notify the crime scene technician who comes down and photographs that item and then ultimately collects it.
Did he photograph then every item where it was located?
Every item that's on that list?
Yes.
I do not know the answer, sir.
Okay. So we don't have a series of pictures that you know about that would document where the clothing was, correct?
Each item of clothing, I can't say that, no. I do not know the answer to that.
Okay. And what room did you go to and who was with you?
I went to the basement, as depicted in the state's exhibit there.
State's exhibits.
And I don't remember who went with me initially.
What was your role?
Just to look for Tom James suits and apparel. I was provided with a list of items with serial numbers next to them that was to be compared to the, say for instance, we find a box of shoes that came from Tom James. It would have a number on that box, and we tried to compare that number to the list that was provided to me by Lieutenant Jeff Herron. And those were the items that he would then want to seize.
And you indicated that our client, Mr. Noel, was there and directed you into a particular location, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Take a look at the picture that's up on the screen. That's our state's exhibit number 3. Is this one of the rooms you went into?
I guess you could say it is a room. It's a downstairs.
Is it part of the unfinished part of that house?
There, to the right of that is a movie theater.
Okay. Which you would say would be a furnished room.
I mean, there's a chair and a table in there that's furnished, so it is furnished. The walls look like, I don't recall, but from the photo, the walls look like they're concrete.
Was the rest of that area as cluttered as this was?
No.
Okay. Would you call that a cluttered room? A lot of stuff in there.
I would say, no, I would not. I would say on top of the table, it's
Yeah.
cluttered, but not that room. I see pictures hanging on the wall.
What about all those boxes
I see
over
some,
there to
well,
the left?
they're kind of stacked up. Certainly not as cluttered as what's on the table.
Correct. What are in the boxes on the left?
I don't recall. I believe those are the shoe boxes.
Did you go through those?
I'm sure I did.
You don't know?
I don't remember.
Okay. What's all the stuff underneath it?
Don't know. Various items.
Okay. And you said that on top of the table was clothing, shoes, a number of pairs of cowboy boots, a hat, all kinds of things there. Is that correct?
I don't believe I said there was clothing items on top of the table. I don't recall if there was clothing items. Certainly there's footwear. There were belts.
You don't know what any of this is underneath the hats?
No.
Okay. Did you go through these boxes?
I may have.
How about this black box here? What was in that?
I don't recall.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did you make it an effort in your search to go through every box in that room?
Yeah, so ultimately, after I found that firearm, a gentleman from the State Board of Accounts came down at some point, and someone else, I left the area and went upstairs. And they continued to search by comparing the numbers.
So the State Board of Accounts is searching now?
Everyone's searching, as we've talked about.
You don't know how long you were in here?
I don't remember.
Now, as I understand it, Mr. Noel told you to go in this room, correct?
Well, I mean, he didn't really say you need to go in this room. He said there are some items here.
Well, he's trying to be helpful to you by saying there may be some items, you've told him what you're looking for, and he's indicating where you could go, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you indicate that one of the items that you were looking for was in that box?
I did not.
It just happened to be that you went to that box.
I ultimately ended up going to that box as I was searching that area. I pulled that chair out, and there this box is that has 2 boxes in it that say Smith & Wesson, which I'm familiar with as being firearms.
Is that the way the box looked on State's Exhibit?
Yes.
Exhibit 4?
I believe so.
For the record? Okay. All right. And the stuff on the box, or the stuff above the box, was the same kind of stuff that we'd seen at a different angle from State's Exhibit that had been previously shown to you?
Yes.
Correct. All right. Now, let me ask you, where was Mr. Noel when you were in that room?
I think he had left the residence at that point.
Are you sure?
Pretty confident he had.
Okay. Are you the only one down there when you're searching? Are you the
Not
only
through
individual?
the whole entire event that I was down there searching, no.
Okay. All right. When was the state police searching in that house before?
I believe August 16th.
Okay. And what were they looking for then?
Bank records.
Okay. Was the search previously that you were part of?
I was part of that search, yes.
That was done the same way? In other words, a number of people went through the house looking for all kinds of items?
Same thing, I got a call from Lieutenant Jeff Herron, said I need your body to assist me in
Okay.
searching.
All right.
And there were a number of people.
And that's what you did?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you indicated that what you found in that box, it had nothing on top of the box, it just was there, correct? Just like these other boxes.
We're talking the box
The
here,
box right
Exhibit
there.
4.
That exhibit that's seeing.
Right, I believe that depicts it how it was.
Okay. And, so is that picture taken before you took the weapons out?
After.
So you take the box out, get the weapons, and then put the box back so they could take a picture?
Yeah, so, Your Honor, going through the search, initially there were photographs taken of the entire scene. Then we conduct the search. And as I'm searching, I pull the chair out and I look down and I see the boxes. I open it up, there's in fact a firearm there. Then I went up and notified Lieutenant Jeff Herron of that fact, as well as First Sergeant Merritt Toomey, who's our crime scene guy. We went back down, I pushed the chair back underneath, put the box back. I don't think I took anything out of the box. I think I pulled the chair out, looked, and was like, okay, there's firearms in here, and then pushed it back under, notified them, and then he took that photo.
My question to you is, does that picture show before the search or after?
That picture there, Exhibit 4, I believe is going to be after my discovery.
You had already discovered something, showed Lieutenant Herron, brought it back, put it back and tried to recreate the scene, and then had him take a picture?
I would like to answer that question, but you say I brought it back. What do you refer to by that?
Did you bring the box up to Lieutenant
No, I did
Herron?
not. I left it right where it was at. I went and got Lieutenant Jeff Herron, and he came downstairs.
And then, when you pushed the chair back, that's when you had the photographer take a picture?
Correct.
Okay. The 2 boxes that you found inside the large white box, there were weapons in there?
They were, yes.
Unloaded, I think you testified on.
I believe they
direct.
were.
Correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. What was their condition?
I think they were brand new. I mean, they appeared to be. They were in the box that comes from the manufacturer. It appeared to be.
Well, matter of fact, you had a receipt, didn't it? Show when it was purchased.
I did not. I don't know the answer to that.
Did you ever look through that box when you turned it over to Lieutenant Herron to find out when they were purchased?
I did not.
Okay. And you don't recall independently ever seeing a receipt in that box?
I don't think so.
Okay. What color were those Smith & Wesson boxes?
Black and white.
Okay. You never took a picture of those out of the box. You
No.
just left them in the box. In other words, you take them out of the box to photograph them that way.
Well, I personally, sir, I never took a photograph.
Okay. And you don't know what the technician did?
I do recall him taking the photos of those firearms out of the box when they were laid on the ground. After, you know, kind of put it in order, I start my search, I pull it out, I see the firearm, open one up, there's a firearm, I immediately go upstairs, notify Lieutenant Jeff Aaron. He comes down with me as well as First Sergeant Merritt Toomey. We put it back like that and the photograph's taken. And then Lieutenant Jeff Herron makes the decision that those firearms are ultimately potentially going to be seized, and they're photographed, taken out of the box.
But we don't have that photograph. The one that you show, or at least testified to, that their guns were taken out of the box, put on the floor, and then photographed.
I don't have that photograph with me, sir.
Okay, and we haven't seen that yet.
I've not seen it.
Okay.
I don't know if we have it or not, but
All right. I'm gonna get a new technician.
I'm fired.
He's fired.
I'm fired.
This was provided in some form. I wouldn't want to do that.
Did you not put those in?
I did not put that.
Oh, okay. Will we take a picture and put it up?
No, I'll just have him.
Okay, yeah.
Officer Mulvaney has been marked for purpose of identification as defendant's exhibit now. And she's given it 1. Can you identify what's in that picture?
I see 2 Smith & Wesson firearm boxes, and I see 2 what appear to be Smith & Wesson firearms with 2 magazines and 2 boxes 9mm Luger ammo.
Does that refresh your recollection of what you saw that day?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. This time, Your Honor, we would offer defendant's exhibit 1.
No objection, Your Honor.
Show defendant's exhibit number 1 admitted without objection. May I see, Mr. Foltz?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor.
I'll give it right back.
You can keep it.
Well, thank you.
Officer, when you took a look at that picture, the 2 boxes that you previously identified that were inside the larger white box, did you recognize those as what you had seen that day?
That photograph that you just showed me certainly appears to be similar type items discovered by me on that date.
And so those boxes were inside the white box?
Correct.
And the weapons were inside the black boxes, which are the Smith & Wesson boxes that you testified to?
That is correct.
And I think the gun was in a cocked position to only show that it was not loaded. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that weapon has a hammer on it or not.
Well, it looked like it was an automatic.
Well, but I mean,
But did you look at
I
the
can't
gun?
tell from the photo if it was cocked. The slide was back on it, which would be in a safe position.
Okay. Did you ever examine the weapons yourself?
I did look at them, and I don't remember 100% if I remember that the slide was back on them or not, but I immediately notified Lieutenant Jeff Herron, and then he took over from there.
Okay. And the shotgun that you found was kind of standing up in that same room?
It was in a box,
Okay.
but shot or barrel up.
Right. I don't believe they.
Officer Mitchell, could you come to the screen and show me where the shotgun was located?
I will, Your Honor.
Sorry to interrupt, gentlemen.
Your Honor, there may be another picture that shows it more accurately.
Okay.
Your Honor, this box right here, there's a cardboard box here.
Yes.
The lid is shut on it. On the day that I went, the 13th of March, if this is the same box. These, they were opened up, and there was a shotgun sticking down inside right here.
All right. Mr. Hurley says there may be another picture that better shows it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Cross-examine, or redirect, Mr. Hurdle.
Detective, how close were the shotguns to the two Smith & Wessons that you found?
3 feet, approximately. I didn't measure, but very close.
Just take it.
Okay. I just want to let you know that's.
Detective, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 2. The State's Exhibit 2, the black barrel, do you recognize that sticking out?
The shotgun barrel sticking out there, I do.
And I'm sorry, approximately how close is that to the chair with the boxes of Smith & Wessons?
A couple feet, 2 or 3 feet.
Arm's distance from you and I?
Yes.
That's it, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Boyles?
No, Your Honor.
I think you're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
See release?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Officer, I'll remind you not to discuss your testimony with anybody, nor allow them to discuss their testimony with you until this matter has been completed.
I understand, Your Honor.
Call your next witness.
Your Honor, State will call Merritt Toomey.
You may.
I can try and retrieve him, Your Honor, I believe he stepped out.
Well, I think he was asked to step out.
There was a motion.
Were you sworn earlier, officer?
Yes.
You were?
Yes.
I'll consider you under oath. You may proceed to the witness stand. Proceed.
Sir, would you state your name for the record?
Merritt Toomey.
And probably for the record, if you spell your first and last name?
First name's Merritt, M-E-R-R-I-T-T. Last name's Toomey, T-O-O-M-E-Y.
Mr. Toomey, where are you employed?
Indiana State Police.
And what is your current position with the Indiana State Police?
I'm a first sergeant in the crime scene section.
I'm sorry, and how long have you been with the State Police?
32 years and a few months.
And has it always been as a crime scene technician, supervisor there?
No, I started out as a road trooper, I was a detective, and then I was a crime scene investigator, and then just within the last year and a half, I became the supervisor.
Is it appropriate to call you sergeant or first sergeant? What's
I'll answer to either one.
First Sergeant, were you asked to be a part of a search warrant on Tay Bridge on March 13th, 2024?
I was.
Who reached out to you originally?
That would be Lieutenant Herron.
Have you worked with Detective Herron in the past ever before or not?
On previous search warrants, I have.
Were you familiar with the residence on Tay Bridge?
It was my first time being there.
And what was going to be your role on March 13th of this year?
I was there to document the property.
Were you to collect evidence or photograph in any way, shape, or form?
I was photographing the property primarily until some evidence arose that needed to be collected.
I want to direct your attention to the basement area, and were you brought down to the basement area to look at, photograph, and collect some evidence?
I was.
And what sort of evidence was that?
There were 2 guns that were still in boxes. I'd have to refer to my notes to tell you the particulars.
Do you recall who directed you to those guns?
That would have been First Sergeant Mitchell.
Do you work with First Sergeant Mitchell much?
I do.
Did you photograph those guns?
I did.
Were they in a box or out of a box when you first saw them?
They were in the box that they came in from the company, and then both of those 2 boxes were inside of another cardboard box.
So they were in their manufacturer's box
Correct.
inside of another box.
Correct.
And you photographed those?
I did.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, if I can have states 2, 3, and 4.
I think they're over there.
We do not have the mark.
I apologize. The court has possession of them.
I'm showing you what's already been admitted as states 2, 3, and 4. Were those photographs that you would have taken on March 13th of the area where the 2 guns were located?
Yes.
And would that have been prior to you personally looking in the boxes, or post you looking into the boxes?
These would have been prior to me looking in the boxes.
Okay. And then, Your Honor, if I could have states 5 also? Oh, I'm sorry, it's defense 1.
That I believe is with.
Oh, here it is.
We don't have them.
Your Honor, I promise, I'm not gonna hold on to anything.
States Exhibit 1, would you have taken that picture with the guns out of the box then?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Give them to the court reporter so I don't lose them.
You collected those items, First Sergeant?
I did.
Were they taken to the Indiana State Police Post and have been kept in the possession of the state police since that time?
Yes, sir.
Did you bring them with you?
I did.
If you could please get them out of their boxes, please. I'm going to put a sticker on it marked States Exhibit 5 for the first one, the one on top, and States Exhibit 6 on the bottom one. Have those been in continuous custody of the state police, you said, since March 13th?
Yes, sir.
Had they been altered or in any way, shape, or form?
I just sealed the box.
Okay, would you seal the box on that day or another day?
These would have been taken to the post on the day that we collected them, put into secure storage, and then we would have packaged everything up another day.
Are they sealed currently?
Yes, they are.
Is that with an evidence tape or seal that the state police uses regularly?
Yes.
Is it a lot of trouble for you to unseal them?
You say to open it,
Open
and I
it,
will.
please. Let's start with States Exhibit 5. And I note that it's in some sort of blue plastic bag. Is that something you would have done, or is that how you found that?
No, this is the way they come from the factory.
Okay. Could you take States Exhibit 5 out of the plastic?
I'm going to put it in a safe mode here.
Okay.
Okay. Gun is empty, so.
Does that
it
gun
is
appear to
secure.
be in basically the same condition as when you found it on March 13th?
Yes.
If you could please put it back in the box, and just for the record, if you could do the same thing to States Exhibit 6, First Sergeant?
Actually, don't put it back in yet. I want to look at it before we put it back in.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Wells may want to.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'll let Mr. First Sergeant Toomey open that box while I show the defense counsel State Exhibit 5.
No objection.
If you could make that gun also safe, First Sergeant, as well, the same as you did with State's Exhibit 5. And does State's Exhibit 6 appear to be in the same condition as when you collected on March 13th?
Yes.
If you could then please replace that back into the plastic container, and I will allow the defense counsel to review that as well.
Officer Toomey, was this fingerprinted, or did you intend to have it fingerprinted, or
No, sir.
anything? So it's acceptable to touch?
Yes.
Without contaminating it?
Correct.
If you could put it in the box, First Sergeant. Your Honor, counsel for the defendant has indicated there's no objection to State's Exhibits 5 and 6. So the State would move to admit those items.
So State's Exhibit 5 and 6 admitted without objection. Thank you.
Your Honor, I have no other questions for First Sergeant Toomey.
Mr. Boyle?
Please, the court, Your Honor. Thank you. First Sergeant, I don't know, do your records show the serial numbers on those two weapons? Do you have that?
Yes.
Let's look at the first exhibit that you have there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Indiana State Police property record and receipt form?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you the one that fills it out, or does that then filled out by Lieutenant Aaron?
No, I took them into evidence, so I would have filled it out.
Okay, perfect. I'm looking at item number 2055.
Yes, sir.
It said that's a sealed cardboard box containing a Smith & Wesson MP Shield semi-automatic handgun. Does it have a serial number?
It does.
And what is that, sir?
H as in Henry, N as in Nora, H as in Henry, 8324.
Okay. And there's another item on there, a 2056.
Yes, sir.
Does that would be an indication of another weapon that was found?
Yes.
And that would also be listed as a Smith & Wesson MP Shield semi-automatic handgun?
Correct.
Does that have a serial number?
It does.
And what is that, sir?
H. Henry and Nora, J. John, 5682.
Now, when you fill out these property record and receipt forms, do you ever indicate on there where the item was found?
When necessary, yes.
Okay, can you tell me from that form, to refresh your recollection, does that show where those items were found?
On there, I just have from the basement, from the Noel basement.
Okay, no specific indication it was on a table, in a box, none of that, correct?
Well, we use complementary things. The photographs work in tandem with the description of
Okay,
things.
but if you just had this, you wouldn't have any idea where it was found, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you this, were you present on the August search?
The August search, the first? No, sir.
You were not there, okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked for purpose of identification is Defendant's Exhibit 2, but I think Mr. Hurdle has no objection, and ask you to take a look at this, would you, please? Tell us what that is, if you can discern it from the exhibit.
It's a receipt from Midwest Gun Exchange Incorporated from Mishawaka, Indiana.
What's it dated?
The date is 10/28/2017.
Okay. Does it have a list of serial numbers of weapons purchased?
Yes.
And would those two serial numbers that were purchased from the Mishawaka gun store in 2017 be the same as the two weapons that you previously identified in the state's direct examination?
I don't have them memorized. I'd have to look at them again.
You certainly can. You've got the weapons and you've got the receipt, so go right ahead.
HNJ 5682 matches this one.
Okay.
HNH 8324 matches the other one.
Okay, so the receipt showing the guns were purchased in Mishawaka in 2017 is supported by the identification both on the receipt and on the weapons with the serial numbers, is that right?
Correct.
Let me ask you, you testified on direct examination, something that you noticed was the fact that it was in a manufacturer's packaging. What does that mean?
This box. This is what it came in.
Okay, and what about the blue kind of cellophane item that you had the weapon stuck in inside the box? What does that tell you?
That's the way I found it inside of the box.
So it would appear that that weapon had not been used and never out of the box since it was manufactured, or at least it was purchased?
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Okay.
It looks to be in good shape, but
Okay. Do you have the receipt? Or did you put it in the box here?
sorry.
There you go, no problem. I've got to give this to the court or I'll get spanked here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
Do you need these anymore?
No, sir, you can put them back. All right. And how many people were doing that search, do you remember, at the house that day? For going through the house?
There was multiple people there. I couldn't tell you an exact number.
You went to the room where the guns were found, is that correct?
I went through the whole house, so I was in each of the rooms.
I want to ask you a question about the particular room where the guns were found in a second, as soon as we get it up on the screen. Taking a look, First Sergeant, at State's Exhibit number 3, did that appear to be the way the room looked when you were there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And where did you believe the guns were found? Can you show us, from your observation here?
You can see the side of the white cardboard box.
This what
Yes.
I'm pointing to? Okay. And was the table in this array as you saw it that day? All kinds of other items on that?
Yes, sir.
Does it appear that that's been there for a while? That all those items have kind of been discarded down there?
That's a possibility.
Well, it could look like somebody was not using that room a great deal, correct? Because they've got a lot of stuff on the table. It's not like it's being used every day.
I've been in a lot of different houses in a lot of different states, sir.
Well, they all don't look alike, do they?
Correct.
This looks crowded, correct?
Correct.
All right. I don't believe I have anything further. Thank you very much.
Redirect?
No other questions to this witness, Your Honor?
And I'll show defendant's exhibit number 2, maybe.
No objection to the receipt that was provided by the defense, Your Honor.
Correct.
Is this staying with the court or going back with me?
They've been admitted.
Officer Toomey, did you examine the shotgun?
Examine it?
Yes.
We just took a cursory look at it because he was allowed to have
I
that.
understand. Was it loaded?
I'm not the one who looked at it.
Do you recall who was?
No, sir.
Do you know what kind it was?
It was a police model, but
Most likely a 12 gauge.
yes, sir.
You keep a shotgun for personal protection in the basement in this crowded area? Feel free to object to anybody. Is that where you'd keep one?
That is not where I would keep it, sir.
Only if you're living in the basement.
There you go.
All right. Court has no further, if that prompts questions from either side.
Not on the court's question, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Officer Toomey, thank you. Is he released from his subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're free to go. I'll remind you, do not discuss your testimony with anybody. Do not allow anybody to discuss their testimony with you until this matter is completed.
First Sergeant, I believe the guns need to stay.
Yes. Who do I give them to?
Miss Lori. Hi, Miss Collada. Do we need to take a break? A break, 3 o'clock. We'll be off record. Oh, there you are. Ms. Clark, for the record, it's my understanding that your motion to quash is now limited based upon some agreements between the parties.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Then I guess you'll wait till your client's call.
I will sit in the gown.
Call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. State calls Jeff Herron.
Officer Herron, you were sworn earlier, correct? Yes, sir.
Sir, would you state your full name for the record?
Jeffrey C. Herron.
And your, spell your last name for the record? Mr. Herron, where are you employed?
Indiana State Police.
What is your current rank or title with the state police?
I'm a lieutenant in charge of investigation for what we call Area 5, which is 3 different districts in the center part of the state, Buttonville, Pendleton, and Youngstown.
Are you in charge of, investigations?
I am in charge of investigations. I supervise roughly 5 detectives and 3 surveillance.
Who is the lead investigator in the Jamey Noel investigation?
I am.
And when did you become involved involved in the Jamey Noel investigation?
Originally got the case on June 13th, 2023, and I started the investigation in July 13th, 2023.
And since July of 2023, have you been the affiant on all search warrants?
I have.
How many are we up to now?
51.
Have you been a part of every interview of every witness thus far?
I have been, yes.
And have you been a part of the arrest of all three individuals in Jamey Noel, Casey Noel, and Misty Noel?
Yes, sir, I have.
I want to have a brief discussion. The August search warrant of Tay Bridge, were you a part of that?
I was the author of that search warrant, and I directed that, but I never actually went to the Tay Bridge location on August 16th.
Who is the owner and occupant of the Tay Bridge home back in August of 2023?
Jamey Noel?
And was that verified at the time you did the warrant?
It was, yes.
At some point in time, was there an arrest warrant for the defendant, Jamey Noel?
Yes, there was.
And was he ultimately arrested and had an initial hearing here in this courtroom?
He was, yes.
Do you remember when the initial hearing was?
November 9th, 2023.
And at the time of the initial hearing, what was the defendant's place of residence at that time?
3001 Old Tay Bridge, Jeffersonville, Indiana.
The same time, or the same place that it was in August of 2023?
That's correct.
Is that the address that he provided to the court at his initial hearing pursuant to the IRAS Indiana risk assessment?
Yes, it is.
Were you present for that initial hearing?
I was, yes, sir.
Were you present when the judge gave Mr. Noel his conditions with respect to firearms?
I was, yes, sir.
Okay, were you in the courtroom specifically then?
I was, yes.
Were you a part of the collection of any firearms?
I was on the receiving end of those firearms at the post after they were collected.
Okay, let's back up just 1 second. The day of the initial hearing, November of 2023, were you asked either by the court or the parties on that day approximately how many guns there were?
I was, yes, by the judge.
How many were there?
There ended up being, I believe, 82 approximately.
And what was your understanding of the court's order at that initial hearing?
That Mr. Noel surrendered all firearms except for one shotgun for home defense.
And you state that some of those weapons were brought to the Indiana State Police Post. What district?
District 45, the Sellersburg Post.
Is that something you logged or inventoried personally?
No, I was there when they were delivered, but I did not log or inventory them.
When you were present, who delivered their guns?
So Charlie Moon, Bradley Kramer, and also present to observe was a Matt Owens for a period of time.
Was Jamey Noel the defendant present at that time?
He was not.
Do you know where he was at that time?
I believe he was still incarcerated or in the process of being released.
So the turning over the weapons was something prior to him being released?
That was my understanding at the time. Since my discussions with Bradley Kramer, I understand maybe he was released slightly early when that was still in the process of going on.
And you were there basically as an observer with respect to those guns?
Correct.
Did somebody from the Indiana State Police log and inventory those?
Yes.
Do you know who that was, or do you recall?
So it was Sergeant Andy Taylor, Sergeant Merritt Toomey, and Sergeant Phil D'Angelo with the Indiana State Police. They were the ones that logged those and provided and filled out the property record receipts.
And you said that was November 9th, 2023?
Yes, sir.
Do you know where the defendant moved back to when he was released from incarceration?
It's my understanding it was 3001 Old Tay Bridge.
Now, I want to direct your attention to the Tom James search warrant, for lack of a better term. Are you familiar with that search warrant?
I am, yes, sir.
Who wrote that search warrant?
I did.
What number search warrant was that?
45.
And just briefly for the court, Tom James is what?
It's a high-end clother, a tailored custom outfits, clothing for men and women.
And the search warrant itself was to collect what?
So it was to collect the items that were purchased, the men's suits, the belts, the shoes. I had attached to the search warrant an exhibit, which was multiple pages of a history of purchases from Jamey Noel that I had provided the court. It was to receive those. He had ultimately purchased, I believe, total $183,000 using the Utica Fire Department money to purchase clothes from Tom James. And then I took the last 5 years for the statute of limitations and used those records in order to seize those items because they were purchased with, ultimately with Utica money, with Utica Volunteer Firefighters Association money, and I was seizing those because they were part of the case.
Were you looking for any sort of paperwork, receipts, et cetera, anything else for any of those that items or apparel?
Right, the documents and the receipts that went along with those items.
What day did you serve that search warrant?
March 13th, 2024.
Who was the officer in charge at that scene?
I was.
Who was all present? Roughly how many officers were present on March 13th?
I believe we had 7 plus the State Board of Accounts. We had 2 uniformed troopers, 4 detectives, and then a CSI, and then a State Board of Accounts.
Is this
agent.
something you coordinated or somebody else?
I coordinated all of that.
Once you received the warrant, did you immediately go to the house, explain how the March 13th kind of went?
So I had as I was looking through the different American Express purchases, I had saw the $183,000, and so I had contacted Tom James, and I ended up speaking to an attorney for that business, and then he provided those documents to me. And then during that conversation, he said that Mr. Noel had purchased a suit of clothing, various clothing, on, I believe it was December 22nd, 23, and that those items had not been delivered yet. And then he told me later that those items would be delivered on March 13th, 2024. In the morning, he told me roughly between 9 and 9:30.
Let me back up 1 second. He was arrested on November 9th.
Correct.
You provided information from Tom James that he used the Utica credit card on December 22nd,
Yes,
and the suit was going to be delivered on March 13th.
correct.
Okay. So, on March 13th, you're at the home or you're waiting for the defendant to be there?
So we were told, so I'd written the search warrant the night before, with the exception of the facts that were going to unfold that morning, so I didn't have to write the entire search warrant that morning. We were told that the suit was going to be delivered roughly 9:30 in the morning, and I knew who the salesman was, and that was Jordan Yoakum. And Mr. Yoakum, I had been in contact with him and over the phone, and he'd indicated about 8:50 that morning that he would be there in about 10 minutes, about 9 o'clock. He described the vehicle he was driving, which was a white Lincoln Aviator. And so we had sat, myself and Detective Hansen had sat in our car down the street, and we watched for the white Lincoln Aviator. And as it had pulled up, then once it had left, I confirmed that the suit was delivered, and then I finished the authoring of the next paragraph of my search warrant, and I sent it to the judge. While that was going on, I'd also called Dave Mitchell that morning and Merritt Toomey and asked for detectives and uniformed officers to stage a couple of miles away so they wouldn't be seen, in order to, when I executed the search warrant, so they would meet me there at the scene once we decided to execute that and the judge had signed the search warrant.
How long did you wait then before you went to the Taylor's home?
So our initial plan was to wait, obviously, until the search warrant got issued. So once it got signed, we moved a little closer so we could see the front of the house to make sure Jamey Noel didn't leave with that particular suit in question. And so once we got a little closer, we saw him come out and open the door of a silver Mercedes-Benz, and when he did, we thought he was possibly getting ready to leave. It looked like he was getting into the car, and so I went ahead and pushed it up. My original thought was I was going to allow for a little bit of time to go by to not burn or to not put Mr. Yoakum in front of everybody, having said that he cooperated with state police because he was concerned about that.
Once you got to the home, was there anyone outside then?
So once we pulled up a little farther away at the intersection there to where we could actually see the house, we saw Mr. Noel come out. When he did, he got in the car. At that point, I called Detective Mitchell and Sergeant Toomey and said, come on, bring everybody down. We're going to go ahead and execute the search warrant. And so me and Detective Hanson pulled in to the driveway there. At that point, Mr. Noel was still out by the silver Mercedes-Benz, and we confronted him. I explained to him that I had a warrant that I wanted to read to him, and then I got relatively close to him, and then I read him the warrant verbatim. So he understood what we were searching for, and then I provided him a copy of the list of the items we were searching for.
Was there anyone else outside the home from the house?
Not from the house, no.
And did you, once you read him the warrant, provided him a copy of the warrant, did you go in?
We waited. He said, I asked him if anybody else were in the house. He said that both of his daughters, Casey and Gracie, were inside of the residence. I said, would you please call them? He called them on the phone with me being present there. He asked them to get their belongings together and come on out. After about 8 to 10 minutes, they still hadn't emerged from the house. I said, I think it's best that we go in. And so Mr. Noel said, hey, I will show you where these items of clothing are, where I keep them. And so he actually led the way, and we went into the house. We entered into the kitchen. As we entered in the kitchen, he walked over to the basement door. He opens the basement door. He yelled for Casey to come out. I apparently didn't know where she was at. And then Casey and Gracie came down the stairs from upstairs. And then at that point, we asked them to get their belongings and leave, and they did. And then after they left, he walked us down and showed us the suit that he just received, which was now on the couch in the living room. And then he walked us into the master bedroom and walked us around there and showed us where his different closets were. And then he turned and walked out. And then we walked down into the basement, and he showed us where other items were in the basement, which was over by that table that we've been talking to this afternoon.
Did you detain the defendant there at the time then or not?
I told him he was free to go.
Did he leave?
He eventually left. He left at, we served the warrant at about 10:34, 10:35 in the morning, and he left at about 10:50. So he stuck around about 15 to 16 minutes.
Were Casey or Gracie detained at all?
They were not. They were told they were free to leave. They actually went outside for a minute, and then they asked, Detective Hanson went out, and Casey asked if she'd get additional items of clothing, and he escorted her back in, and then she went back out and stayed until, I believe, Mr. Noel came out and got into his Mercedes-Benz.
Once you started the search, had they already left?
He actually got into a BMW. Once we started the search, yes. Well, merit to me, I had directed him to take photographs all around the house, which is standard procedure, and then once we got into the house, once it was secure and we figured there was nobody else in there, then he had started his photography throughout the house.
Who determined who was going to search in which room of the home?
We were all standing in the kitchen. We say, oh, that was the uniform detectives, or uniform officers and the detectives, and I broke them up into teams. I sent Detective Mitchell and or First Sergeant Mitchell and James Donahoe and Chris Hanson down initially with him into the basement, and then the other detective, which your name escapes me, and then one of the uniformed troopers into Mr. Noel's bedroom to start doing a search. I provided both of them with copies of the list of the different items we were looking for and explained to them on those particular items. If I had been, having gone actually met me with the attorney, he had showed me that on the inside pocket, each one of these particular suits were monogrammed. It had Jamey Noel's name on it. It had a lot number and a series of other numbers, and a lot of those numbers correlated with those documents that we had. So we were able to seize what we believed to be those exact items on that list.
And you provided them lists?
I provided both of them lists, both teams' list.
Did you designate yourself to a particular area, or were you kind of monitoring what was happening? Because
I was a supervisor, it was my crime scene or my case, I moved around throughout the day.
Roughly how long after the search started did Detective Mitchell contact you about the basement?
Probably 20 minutes or so. He contacted me and said, hey, I found a couple of firearms down here. Would you come down here and take a look?
And did you go to the basement?
I did.
Detective, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit 7.
Okay.
Do you recognize that diagram?
This is a diagram I asked Detective Hanson to make of the basement of the 3001 Old Tay Bridge, Jamey Noel's residence.
And does it give a, obviously not to scale, but does it give an accurate depiction of the layout of the basement?
It does. It's not to scale, but it does, to me, that having been through that basement, it does lay out it is an accurate description of the basement.
Your
No
Honor,
objection, Your Honor.
Statement would be States Exhibit 7.
I think I heard Mr. Boyle saying no objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibit 7 admitted for demonstrative purposes.
Now, if you could, without the aid of States Exhibit 7, walk the judge to the location of the firearms that Detective Mitchell pointed out to you.
As you walk down the stairs to the basement, the first room you enter will be a finished open room. There's a bar off to one side. There's a living room with furniture and everything, and then there's ultimately an exit door and a patio out to go ultimately to the pool of the residence. And then if you continue to walk straight, and that's what I did, knowing I'd been down there just a moment before with Mr. Noel, if you walk straight, you go into your right is a movie room, and off to your left, there's like a little sitting area table with a lot of items on top of the table off to your left-hand side. And then there's like a curtain where there's some HVAC system and I believe a sump pump and things like that. There's one of those blinds set up there.
Were there any bedrooms located in the basement?
There was, but before, when you enter that main living room, as soon as you go down the stairs off to the left, there's a bedroom, and I believe that was Casey's bedroom, is where that was, off to the left.
And from the base of the steps in the basement, approximately how far was the table, chairs, and firearms ultimately located?
So the room is probably 15 foot wide, maybe a little bit wider, so 15 feet from the base of the stairs, then into that room where the table is, and so then another 5 or 6 feet. And once you enter into that room, off to the left is the table.
Once Detective Mitchell got in there, did you observe the firearms in the boxes that they were contained in? I believe States Exhibits 5 and 6, the Smith & Wessons?
I did. He showed me and said, hey, look, I pulled this out, meaning the chair out. I saw this white box, and on the top of that box, you could clearly see a Smith & Wesson box, which I recognized as being a firearm box.
I'm showing you 4 pages titled States Exhibits 8 and 9. You stated that you were present for the initial hearing of the defendant on November 9th.
Yes.
And the States Exhibits 8 and 9, what are they?
So States Exhibit 8 is an order directing the transport and retention of certain firearms of the defendant. States Exhibit 9 is order on initial hearing. And that's it.
The firearms that were collected on March 13th, roughly a month ago, were those shotguns?
No, we collected 2 pistols, 2 semi-automatic 9mm Smith & Wesson pistols.
Did you collect those based on these orders and the verbal order from the judge on November 9th, 2023?
Yes. So I was present in the court when that order was issued by the judge. During the search for our items of clothing receipts, we found those 2 firearms. I immediately thought that would be contraband, so I asked for further instructions from you, but it was all my intentions. Because of hearing the judge's order, I was going to seize those items, and I did ultimately direct that those be seized.
No objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I believe probably the court could probably take judicial notice, but the state would move to admit States Exhibits 8 and 9, the court's orders in the felony cause.
So States Exhibits 8 and 9 admitted.
Did you also note a shotgun located in the basement?
I did.
Is that something that you collected?
I did not collect, and I did not have it ordered be collected. Again, I was present for the judge's order that Mr. Noel retained 1 shotgun. Before we left, I made sure we did not find any other firearms, and therefore, that was the shotgun that I believed he was legally entitled to own or by the court, so I left that.
Can you describe the shotgun to the court?
I believe it was a pump shotgun, still had a tag on it, was not loaded, and it was sitting, it was in a box, and you could see the barrel sticking out, and I believe you had a picture of it earlier.
So the exhibit that was admitted through Detective Mitchell, you would agree that that appears to be true and accurate as how you saw it that day also?
Yes.
The two Smith & Wesson in the boxes, do you know if they were loaded at the time?
They were not loaded.
Did you physically take them out of the boxes, examine them at all, and look at them?
So Sergeant Toomey initially took them out. I did pick them up while he had them out after he was done taking photographs, and I got the serial numbers off them, and then ultimately called who I believe to be the seller of that firearm in order to verify that those were owned by Mr. Noel.
The defendant admitted an exhibit, a receipt for those two weapons, and you were in the courtroom here just a little while ago when that happened.
Yes.
Was that your findings as well, that they were purchased from, I believe, Midwest Guns?
Midwest Exchange, yes, and I got all the paperwork associated with that, including the 4473s, which is the federal document which the purchaser has to fill out, including their name and a list of questionnaires, and it included the serial numbers that were mentioned today, included those two firearms.
Was there any ammunition found at the home?
There was.
Was that ammunition seized as well?
It was not seized. To my knowledge, the judge didn't say anything about not having possession of ammunition, so I did not seize that. It was 9mm ammunition. It's still in the box.
How long have you been with the state police?
35 years.
And can you just tell us the different roles you had with the state police or ranks?
So I started out in November of 1988. Goodness, sorry. I started out in November 1988. I was a road trooper until out of the Indianapolis Post, then ultimately out of the Putnamville Post until October of 95. Then I became a detective, a district detective, worked Putnamville District, 3 counties. And then from there, 2000, I got promoted to investigative squad sergeant in Indianapolis Post until 2005. Then I got promoted to district investigative commander of the Putnamville Post until 2016, and then I've held the current position, which is area investigative commander, from 2016 until now. And so 29 years of being a detective, and then 7 years as being a road trooper.
How many people did you say report to you?
I believe it's 25, I think. I'd have to add up. 25 plus 3 civilians.
As a supervisor and 30-plus years on the state police, have you ever been asked to enforce court orders?
Yes.
You ever disregard court orders?
Not intentionally, no.
What if your employees disregard court orders?
They are instructed that's part of their duties, and if we, depending on the situation, they ultimately would get written up, and then we possibly look into the situation, and they could face disciplinary action depending on the degree of what they did or didn't do.
Is a subpoena to come to court a court order?
Yes.
If somebody would disregard a subpoena, would that be important?
Yes. They can get in trouble.
Disciplinary possibility?
Possibly.
You worked the road for a period of time.
I did. Occasionally still put on the uniform.
Ever stop anybody for a traffic violation?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Judge, I'm going to object to relevancy now. That doesn't do much to do with the March search warrant.
Your Honor, the relevancy is the issue of the defendant being a law enforcement officer for nearly 30 years, working the road, stopping people. And I'm sure at times there were people who denied ownership of contraband, who said it wasn't mine, who point to somebody else in the home. or I didn't know it was there. And I'm merely trying to elicit that from this witness.
Judge, those aren't relevant because we don't know any of the facts of those cases. It's speculation, clearly.
Well,
many of the years he was supervisor, he wasn't on the road. He's only been on the road 7 years. But as it contains this issue for this court, he has no evidence that he could indicate to the court. It's all speculation of what he may have done or what somebody may have done in the past.
Mr. Erdahl, I'll sustain that objection, but I get the point.
All right, thank you, Judge. Did you examine the other items on that table, Detective?
Some of them.
Did they appear to be men's, women's, or could you even tell?
A lot of them were men's, and a lot of them were items that were listed on the documents that I provided.
Was there Tom James apparel, shoes, clothes, etc., located in that general area by that table?
So there were items, so when you say Tom James, so on that list there was like different brands of shoes that weren't specifically Tom James, but they were sold by Tom James. And there was belts, $700, $800 belts or $800, $900 shoes that were listed on that itemized list that were sold by Tom James. I don't recall there being a suit that was specifically a Tom James brand suit on that table around that, but again, those other items were around there.
Judge, I don't believe I have any other questions for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please the court. Lieutenant, let's go back a little ways in time. August 16th of 2023. Did you have an occasion to be involved in the search of Mr. Noel's home on that date?
I was the author of the search warrant and was directing that. Bill Dalton was ultimately in charge of that, and I never went to Mr. Noel's house.
You never went there that day?
That day.
But you were in charge of either getting the search warrant or putting items that you thought would be appropriate in that search warrant to be asked to be seized. Is
Correct.
that correct?
Yes.
Was one of those items weapons?
No.
You didn't ask for any weapons at that time, did you? You asked for books and records, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. How many people went on that search?
On August the 16th?
Yes, sir.
Approximately 40 in different locations. We had 4 different locations. Mr. Noel's.
Let's talk just about the house.
I would have to go back and look at my notes, but I believe I sent 4 or 5 in each team.
Okay. And when you send a team to a particular location, because now you've got 4 locations, 40 people, do you suggest to the team what they're supposed to look for and where they're supposed to look for it?
I give them a copy of the search warrant. I had a briefing that morning, explained to them what the search warrant entailed at each location, made sure there was an OIC officer in charge of each scene, and explained the process of processing the different house, the whole barn, whatever, the fire stations, and what items were allowed to be seized and what I was looking for.
Were you looking for boxes that had receipts?
We were looking for anything that had bank records. I mean, if a box had a receipt in it or a
You'd
bank
look at
record.
it, wouldn't it?
Of course.
Yeah, that'd be an item that you would want to look at, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And on August 13th, you took pictures of areas in the house, or somebody within this team of 40 people took some pictures, or the evidence technician at some point took pictures.
Not on August 13th, on August 16th we did. You got the date wrong, Mr. Wells.
Yeah. Did you take pictures?
They did.
Okay. Who suggested that?
There wasn't a suggestion, it was I was telling them to do it, and they did it.
Okay. And you asked them to be thorough in their process, didn't you, about taking pictures and getting those receipts and things that the warrant requested?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach you?
You bet.
Lieutenant, ask you to take a look at this photograph, which has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 3. Ask you, can you identify that?
That is a picture of the basement at Jamey Noel's residence, 3001 Old Tate Bridge. That's a picture of the basement as you come down the stairs and look to the left of the table that I've been explaining.
Is that the picture that you sent to Mr. Stewart on April the 8th?
It's one of the pictures, yes.
And so that's a picture you're familiar with, and you, I think we requested it and you sent it over.
I did, yes.
Could you look at that picture and indicate, is there a white box located in that picture?
Yes, it's on top of the chair that's pushed in under the table.
Okay, and that's the white box that we talked about, was the white box where the weapons were found in March. Is that correct?
That appears to be correct, yes.
Okay, so on August the 16th, with all these people, some of which were directed to go to the home of Mr. Noel and search for documents, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated to me earlier that boxes were important, that they may contain receipts and all kinds of things that you thought, or the people doing the search would be interested in to comply with the search warrant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that white box was there on when that search was conducted,
On
correct?
August the 16th, based on the picture, I wasn't again at the scene, but
Sure.
based on the picture and what I've been told,
Did anybody ever
it was
tell you
there.
that they went through the box on August 16th to look for receipts? And oh my gosh, we found Smith & Western weapons.
I had a discussion with both First Sergeant Mitchell.
Just answer my question.
Well, I'm trying to.
Did anybody ever tell you that they went through that box on August 16th to look for receipts?
The answer would be, they told me they went through multiple boxes, multiple rooms, and they found multiple weapons.
Sure. And so multiple boxes would be really all the boxes that would be important that are hiding receipts in that very crowded room, correct?
Could be, sure.
Okay. But you're not there, so you're trusting them to do a complete search.
Right.
Okay. And were weapons located in the house that day?
I was told yes.
Okay, and where were they?
Throughout the house.
Okay, and were they picked up?
No, it was not subject to my search warrant.
Okay, so the weapons were left in the house?
Correct.
Okay. But all the receipts that you believed were in the house that were important were taken on that search?
Unless we missed some, yes.
Sure. Well, you would assume, would you not, that that box, that white box sitting on the chair, which was there in August, would have been looked through by somebody in order to look for receipts. It's a box, it's open, it's along with other boxes, and we're looking for receipts, so you never know where receipts go. You would have looked through that. Wouldn't the team have looked through that?
I would assume so.
Okay. Did anybody ever tell you on August the 17th, the next day, oh, by the way, we found 2 Smith & Wesson's weapons in that box?
No, but the box didn't come up.
Okay.
Again, they told me that there was multiple firearms throughout the house. They told me a number of different things. They described the inside of the residence because I wasn't there.
Well, if they had found the weapon, the rest of the house, they would have said something to you. Oh, by the way, when we're looking through receipts, we found 2 Smith & Wesson boxes in the basement in a white box on a table with all kinds of other stuff.
No, they would not have.
Okay. They wouldn't have told you that.
No, they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
It was immaterial.
It's just a Smith & Wesson box, and we're only looking for receipts, so we're not going to mention it to the lieutenant.
Correct.
But you did find weapons.
Well, again, they mentioned it to me. They said, hey, there's a bunch of firearms in the house. Throughout the house, there were firearms.
Okay. So you said leave them there. No problem.
Correct.
We're not looking for guns. We're looking for receipts.
Right.
Okay. So, you were asked on direct that those weapons were purchased in 2017, correct?
I don't believe you asked me when the exact purchase was, but they were...
October of 2017.
The firearms were purchased according to the receipt I received from Mr. Morrison at Midwest Gun Exchange, said that they were purchased on October 28, 2017.
In what city?
Mishawaka, Indiana. However, I believe, and I haven't verified that yet, some of the firearms, especially the ones he bought with the American Express Utica card, were shipped to Keesler's police supply, even though they were purchased via the phone and paid for. They were then shipped to Keesler's police supply, and then they were ultimately, paperwork was done there, and they were receipted over to Mr. Noel.
But the two we're interested in were identified by First Sergeant Mitchell as being purchased on the 17th, 2017, correct?
Those were purchased on 2017, but actually where they were obtained from, I'm not sure. They could have been obtained actually from Keesler's police supply here in Jeffersonville, Indiana. I know they were bought up in Mishawaka.
And you know that they were still, according to Lieutenant Mitchell, in their original supply packages.
It appeared to be, yes.
Okay. You believe that to be true, and so does Lieutenant Mitchell, or Sergeant Mitchell. I didn't mean to promote him. That's Carter's problem. Is that correct?
That he was promoted? Or what was the question?
The question was that First Sergeant Mitchell testified to the court that it was his opinion from his firearms experience or background as a documenter of material for the state police that those appeared to be in their original packaging.
They did, yes.
That's the picture.
Has this been admitted?
It is the same.
It's the same.
Yes. Your Honor, just for the record, I wanted to be clear that this is a picture taken from the August
Correct.
search?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And not from the March?
Correct.
Okay.
I have no objection to that, Judge.
All right. Show them.
Same picture with the boxing. Go back. Right there. Lieutenant, I'm going to have you look at the screen. That is a picture that has been introduced by the state. Is that white box that was picture taken in March of 2024 appear to be the same white box that was in your picture in August of 2023?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Redirect.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Officer Herron, you got to remember, I'm from Washington County.
Yes, sir.
What in the hell does an $800 belt look like?
I was a little surprised at that myself. He had a number of those. It looked pretty normal to the same kind of belt that I wear, which is about $30, but didn't look a whole lot different.
And Mr. Boyle suggested that the shotgun in the basement would be an appropriate place if someone lived there. Did it appear as if Mr. Noel was living in the basement?
No, it appeared he lived upstairs in the bedroom because that's where his personal effects were, his clothing was, his coat that he retrieved from in there. It looked like he was living upstairs in the master bedroom.
That prompts questions from anyone.
Not from the state, Your Honor.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Question. The shotgun still had a tag on it as brand new, didn't it?
It did, yes.
When was it purchased?
I don't know the answer to that.
Where did it purchase from?
I would have to look at my records and see.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Hurdle?
Your Honor, the state doesn't have any more witnesses.
No,
Oh,
do you have any
sorry.
other questions?
I'm sorry. I have no other questions for you.
You didn't happen to ask him where the shotgun was that I allowed him to keep for personal protection, did you?
I did not ask him that, no.
That prompts any further questions?
No, Your Honor.
Officer Herron, you may step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Any other witnesses, Mr. Hurdle?
No, Your Honor.
Wait just a moment.
Break just a moment?
Just a moment before we go forward.
How do you define a moment, Mr. Moe?
Judge, I'm a lawyer, you know that.
I know. So go
Much-
back,
much
go
as the
to
moment
the back,
you
is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we can just have a moment chat before we follow with it.
All right, we'll be up there.
Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Wild? All right, back on record. Call your first witness, Mr. Wild.
Your Honor, we call Bradley Kramer.
Mr. Kramer, you were sworn earlier, correct?
Pardon?
You were sworn earlier?
No, sir.
You were not? Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties for perjury testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
Answer counsel's questions, and the court may have some questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kramer.
Good afternoon.
So you're here and you understand why you're here to ask some questions or answer some questions regarding some events that took place back in November 9th of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
So prior to that date.
Did we have him identify himself for the record?
Well, I thought everybody did, Bradley. Could you state your full name for the record?
Bradley Kramer.
And, Judge, I'm not asking any other
That's fine.
information.
That's fine.
Thank you, sir. So Bradley, you're here as a result of some things that took place on November 9th of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was a day that Mr. Noel was arraigned, his initial hearing occurred in this courtroom, right?
Yes, sir.
And you were here?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of your being here, you were asked to go to the home that he lives in with his wife on Old Tate Bridge Road, right?
Yes, sir.
And you were asked to go there to retrieve the firearms that were in the home, right?
Yes, sir.
And why did you need to go retrieve the firearms?
At that point in time, I believe it was the court's order that all of his firearms needed to be removed from his home aside from one shotgun, I believe. And I went to the house to retrieve those items.
In fact, the one shotgun that you were aware that Mr. Noel was allowed to keep, you saw that in the basement?
Objection.
Did you see the shotgun in the basement?
I saw a shotgun in the basement, yes.
Yeah, okay. And that was on November 9th?
Yes.
Okay. And you left it?
Yes.
Because you understood the judge allowed the shotgun to be left?
Yes.
And when you say you saw it in the basement, we've heard a lot of testimony, there's an area in the basement that's kind of unfinished, right?
No, it was not in that room, no, sir.
Okay, where was it?
It was in the finished portion of the basement.
Where the table?
Near the table, yes.
Near the table where all the boxes are?
Yes, sir.
If I could, Ms. Fleeman, could you put that out?
I don't see it. I've never seen that before. So.
I'm just trying to figure out how we end up with this show, but we need to. Okay. So this has been put in, this is a photograph that's been put into evidence, Mr. Kramer. Can you tell us, are you familiar with, or is that something you recognize?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us what it is that you recall that to be.
It is a table with stuff on it.
Where at?
In the basement.
Of
Jamey Noel's house.
Okay. And this is this the area where you saw the shotgun that you left?
Yeah, I believe so. It was in that general vicinity, yes.
Okay. And so your purpose was to go to gather up the firearms?
Yes.
And you went with somebody, right?
Yes, sir.
It was Mr. Moon?
Yes, sir.
Somebody you didn't know?
No, sir.
And you and Mr. Moon went in the house?
Yes, sir.
And you were going through the home to get the guns?
Mm-hmm.
And while you were doing that, Mr. Noel, Jamey called you on the phone as well?
Yes, sir.
Telling you where guns were located?
Yes, sir.
When you went down there in that area, were there guns other than that shotgun that was left down in that general area?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the judge about what guns were just there?
I don't recall exactly how many, the quantity. I didn't keep an inventory of where I found what guns, but there were several boxes of unopened, I don't know, I guess, rifles. I don't know if they were rifles or shotgun, but longer guns. And I don't specifically remember if there were handguns near or around that area, because there was quite a bit of guns that were retrieved that day.
And when there was a box with a gun in it, shotgun, you said you saw some boxes with shotguns?
There was unopened boxes with long guns in them. I don't know if they were shotguns or rifles.
Did you open the boxes?
No, he just took the boxes.
Took the boxes?
Yes, sir.
And then Detective Harrod previously testified there were about 82 guns that were brought to the state police post.
Okay.
And you and Mr. Moon brought those guns to the state police post, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a recollection of when you were there retrieving those guns, if you saw this white box?
No, sir, I don't.
I understand. Mr. Kramer, when you were asked to assist in collecting all of the guns in the house, you knew that was a pretty important request.
Yes, sir.
Why was it important, in your opinion?
Because the court ordered it.
And when you were there trying to get all the guns that were in Mr. Noel's house, you looked for them and tried to find them, right?
No, sir, I didn't search for anything, if that's the correct verbiage. I was directed towards areas where guns may be.
Okay. And when you say you didn't search in the professional sense of search?
Yes, sir, it's not something, if in a professional capacity, being a law enforcement officer in the past, like, it's not like how I would necessarily, I wouldn't consider what I did a search.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kramer.
Mr. Herbert, cross-examination?
I'm sorry, who directed you, Mr. Kramer, to the locations of the guns?
Jamey did.
And that was via telephone,
Yeah.
FaceTime, Zoom, what was it?
Just telephone, yes, sir.
Okay, so if he told you to look in a closet, you looked in a closet. If he told you to look in a drawer, you looked in a drawer. If he told you to look in the bedroom, you looked in the bedroom.
Yes, sir.
I think that's all I have.
Mr. Wild, redirect?
Yes, sir. And when you were being directed to where the guns were, Mr. Noel told you that there were guns up in the bedroom, right?
Yes, sir.
And you went up to the bedroom, and there they were.
Yes.
And you got those.
Yes.
And he directed you that there were guns in that area as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And you went there, and you found guns there.
Yes, sir.
So where Mr. Noel directed you and told you there were guns there.
Yes, sir.
And you collected them.
I collected the guns that I saw, yes, sir.
And you felt like you got them all.
I felt like I got the guns where he directed me to find them.
And he directed you and told you that there were guns here.
Objection.
State your objection.
He didn't state that he was told to go there by Mr. Noel. I think there's a mischaracterization of the testimony. If you could rephrase the question.
Thank you. So when Mr. Noel was talking to you about where the guns were, right?
Yes, sir.
Did he tell you there were guns down in that part of the basement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Mr. Noel directed you to where the guns were, and you found guns in that area?
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Mr. Hurdle?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. Is he excused?
Your Honor, we have no questions.
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
You're free to go.
Thanks, sir.
If you leave the courtroom, I will direct you not to discuss your testimony with anybody, nor allow them to discuss their testimony with you or anything else about this matter until this matter is completed.
I would very much like that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Lyon.
Thank you, Judge.
Call your next witness.
Your Honor, we don't have any further witnesses.
Yes, sir.
No further witnesses?
None, Judge.
State, any rebuttal? Would like to make argument? How could I imagine you would?
Never me.
You can go first. I'll let you start the proceeding.
Your Honor, the state's exhibits that were put into evidence, specifically the orders by the court, they didn't direct Brad Kramer or Charlie Moon to do anything. They directed Jamey Noel to do what needed to be done, to remove all weapons out of that house, off of his property, except one shotgun. The court was abundantly clear. It was a court order. It was recited in a number of documents, order on initial hearing, and then an order directing the transport and retention of certain firearms. Designee, surrender all firearms. He was the one subject to the court order, not Kramer, not Moon, not anybody else. Him. The initial hearing was in November. The search warrant for Tom James was March 13th. 125 days, and the evidence today was that he was living there. So for 125 days, he's in and out of that house. And so when he's in and out of that house, not once did he look around and say, I wonder if Brad Kramer got all the guns. I wonder if Charlie Moon got all the guns. For 125 days, he could have picked up the phone, called his lawyer, picked up the phone, called community corrections, called the court and said, hey, I've got 2 guns here. They missed them. I don't want to get in trouble. This guy's a law enforcement officer for 20-some years with the state police, 2 terms as the sheriff. He knows what a court order is, and the responsibility is on him and no one else. The evidence was rather clear. The shotgun was right by these weapons. His clothing was there. He directed him to there. He directed him to the bedroom where the Tom James clothing was. Did he forget? It doesn't matter if this gun was brand new, 5 years old, an antique gun. The court did not specify in its order that the gun had to be in good operating order. The gun had to be loaded. The gun had to be unloaded. The gun had to be in his bedroom. The gun had to be in his dresser drawer by his bed. None of those things happened. It was his responsibility, and the court, again, made it clear that that's what he was responsible for and no one else. The defense wants to talk about the issue of, didn't they look at these boxes back in August? Didn't they see these Smith & Wesson boxes? And it really doesn't matter. These firearms were not subject to a search warrant. And maybe they did open up the boxes and they see 2 firearms in it. The detective's going to say, put them back. Who cares? It doesn't matter because they were not subject. He was in lawful possession of those firearms at that time. Not until the court issued its order in November did it become a violation of the court order and subject to contempt possibilities. The court filed this sua sponte. The court filed a rule to show cause based on a warrant return by Detective Heron. He's been entitled to due process. That's what this hearing is for. He's had his due process. He's had his chance to say, this is why I shouldn't be held in contempt. That's not happened. Willful, intentional disobedience of a court order. That's what's happened here. Not an oversight, not an overlooking. Maybe there was an oversight on Brad Kramer. So what? It doesn't matter. The responsibility bears on him and him alone, and the accountability bears on him and him alone. So I'd ask the court to find him in indirect contempt for the violation of the court's order, that the burden has been met, and the state would ask the court to choose how best to deal with the violation and the contempt.
Thank you, Mr. Hurdle.
Please,
Mr. Boyles,
Court.
are
Thank
you
you,
from
Your
the team that's going to argue?
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
Thank you. Judge, I think Mr. Hurdle says it doesn't matter, but it does matter. Willful intent to violate a court order is exactly what it means. A willful activity on his part to violate the court order. As I recall that when Mr. Noel was incarcerated and before the court permitted him to be out on bond, he would have had to assure this court that all weapons were out of the house except for a shotgun. So he wasn't free to go to his house and go through all of those weapons. And so he did what, under those circumstances, would be a reasonable, ask people who, one of whom was in law enforcement, one of whom was a gentleman that Mr. Moon, who Mr. Kramer did not know, but they volunteered to go out and assist Mr. Noel in his responsibilities to this court in getting all those weapons. And they did that. And all those weapons were turned over to the state police. Now we know that in August, the state police had the photograph of the exact box in question in this case. And Mr. Hurdle may be right, that they went through and they noticed, but nobody at least made note because the weapons apparently weren't of any interest to anybody until after Mr. Noel was being arrested and required to turn them into the court. But if the state police knew that those weapons were in the house, they could have said, wait a minute, I think that theirs were missed because we're counting all the weapons, and those Smith & Wessons were in that box downstairs when we're looking for documents, weren't there. Do people make mistakes? Of course they do. But we know that those guns have been purchased since 2017 and they're in the same box, haven't been disturbed, haven't been out, haven't been touched, or at least no indication that they have by the state police themselves. We know that the court permitted him to have a shotgun, brand new, sitting in the basement. This does not rise itself, in my mind, to a fact that this is a willful contempt of this court order. I think that it was an inadvertent. Would I have done it differently? May very well have done it. I may have had someone else that I thought would be better, an independent person, to go to the house to make those choices about what was there and what wasn't there. Obviously, it's a room that doesn't get much attention because everything in the room was packed as if nobody has been in that room for quite some time. So I think that the argument that we're making would be that this is not a willful attempt of Mr. Noel to violate this court order. Was it inadvertent? Yes. Did he apologize for having those weapons there when he thought all of the weapons in the house had been accounted for except the one that this court permitted him to have? I don't believe, Your Honor, this has risen to a level of contempt of this court order. And we would respectfully ask the court to not find so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Determination whether the alleged contemptuous act was committed with the intent to show disrespect or defiance is a factual matter to be determined by the court. Our Supreme Court has held that the respondent, Mr. Noel, has the burden of establishing that his failure to obey the order was not willful. I told Mr. Noel, don't do anything stupid. Do not try to deceive me, defy me. You will not like the consequences. Today is that day. You are not the law.
you don't interpret the law, you don't enforce the law, you're not above the law. I find that you are in contempt of this court. Take him into custody. No, that's enough. I'll find you guys in contempt for disrupting the proceedings, and you'll be there right there with him. Now, what is an appropriate sanction? The question is, I can sentence him up to 180 days without a trial, or I can sentence him to a day, or I can release him. You know what I think the answer is? 60 days in. That's what I think the answer is today. Now, Mr. Wilder.
Yes, Your Honor.
Or Mr. Boyles, I apologize, Mr. Boyles, your lead. Before he is released, I'll take your suggestion. I want an independent individual to scour that household to determine that there's no further weapons. I find that Mr. Hurdle's original argument that he was trying to make that I sustained, an officer of the law, every time I go into court, I hear, I didn't know it was there, I didn't know it was there, I really didn't. You've heard that a million times. You've heard it a million times, and yet you still take them into custody, would be my guess. Every officer in the world has heard, I didn't know it was there, it's my friends. I'm not buying it. It was your burden. It's your responsibility. And today, the court will enforce that. Take him away. Anything else, Mr. Hurdle?
Nothing to say.
Mr. Boyles?
No, we'll be approached.
You may.